news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Monday, November 1st. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, 4 degrees, 5 in Smiths Falls, and here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. Over 100 employees at Ottawa Hospital notified last month. A reminder, they had to be fully vaccinated by today or they would face unpaid leave. Here's City News reporter Parushka Gobolkista.
Those employees at the Ottawa Hospital who are not yet fully vaccinated will face the decision to go on unpaid leave for violating the hospital's COVID-19 policy. The policy comes into effect today, which requires all workers, including nurses, doctors, and even student workers, to have both COVID shots. Although a letter had been sent to the hospital's employees a month ago reminding them to get fully vaccinated, the hospital's president and CEO Cameron Love says that there's still a small percentage of workers who remain unvaccinated. He adds that the hospital will continue to work with them to ensure they have all the right information regarding their options. Parishka Gopal-Kista, City News.
You can grab another vaccine starting today. This time it is for flu. They're available to the general public at your local pharmacy or your doctor's office. Health officials have confirmed 1.5 million more doses delivered to pharmacies than last year. They add that it is safe to receive a flu shot and a COVID vaccine at the same time. Ask your doctor, though, if you happen to have any questions about that. City News time 9:01. Now the forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
Some showers are possible today, otherwise sun and cloud. The high 10 degrees, a gusty west wind. Tonight, mainly clear down to 2. And tomorrow, some showers, mainly for the afternoon and evening, but could see some flurries mixing in Tuesday night as well. The high near 9. For today, the high 10.
And right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, it's 5 degrees. 4 people were injured in a balcony collapse last night that happened near Elgin. Paramedics and police alerted Ottawa Fire to the incident last night on Frank Street. Now, apparently, just before 10 o'clock, there were multiple people on a small balcony on the second floor of a 3-floor building off Elgin. A man in his 20s was taken to the trauma center with serious injuries, but at last word was in stable condition. 3 other people received treatment for minor injuries. It is being called the Last Best Hope, a crucial UN climate summit opening up in Glasgow, Scotland. Papal appeals for prayers and activist demands for action.
Prime Minister is among the world leaders at the COP26 for 2 weeks of what's expected to be intense diplomatic negotiations. They'll be talking about slowing global warming and adapting to the climate damage already done. Earlier, as the G20 meeting wrapped up in Rome, Justin Trudeau said he'd hoped to see a more ambitious agreement. But the PM did say the leaders managed to make progress by committing to address some key issues like limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Jerry Smith, the Canadian Press.
City News time 9:03. Rogers Communications, with 2 different boards of directors, each claiming to be in power, will be in a BC Supreme Courtroom today. The battle for control of the telecom company, which is the parent to this radio station, has publicly pitted members of the Rogers family against one another. A petition filed by Edward Rogers last week wants the court to legitimize the board that he formed after he was ousted as chair last month. His mother, sisters, and their associates say the only valid board is the one that existed prior to Edward's changes. I'm Andrew Boyle. For News Anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Good, bad, or complicated.
There's no news in Ottawa and the Valley he won't talk about.
It's the Rob Snow Show on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Yep. Monday in November with Halloween in the rearview mirror. And I have snow tires on my vehicle. What a keener. Good morning. Welcome to the Rob Snow Show on City News. Thank you for giving us part of your morning. There's plenty happening, plenty of news. I hope you'll share your views on the news, since that's kind of what we do around here. Very busy program ahead for you. We cover a lot of territory between now and noon. Mandatory vaccinations, still a big news story. Every day it seems there's a new twist to the mandatory vaccination story. See, the Ottawa Police Service has had a change of heart and will now require mandatory vaccinations for all members of the Ottawa Police Service, and it's giving them until the end of January. Until the end of January to get it done, taking their sweet time. There was quite a lot of criticism for the police service from political quarters as well as in the general public that the police service, well, quite frankly, was not setting the appropriate example when it decided that it would be good enough to make vaccination voluntary. But then late last week, the police service had this change of heart. The chief of police, Peter Slowly, issued a statement, but it doesn't say in the statement what would happen to a member of the Ottawa Police Service who refused to get vaccinated. In other words, would they be put on unpaid leave? Would they lose their jobs? That's not how I read this statement. This is what the statement says, quote, members who have not been vaccinated will be required to be tested every 72 hours. We have received a limited supply of tests at no cost to the taxpayer. After those tests run out, unvaccinated employees will be required to pay for their own tests. That's what it says in the statement, okay? So I'll leave that with you, whether you think that goes far enough. We are reporting this morning on the CEO of the Ottawa Hospital, Cameron Love. Today is the deadline for staff at the Ottawa Hospital to show they've been fully vaccinated or they could be put on unpaid leave. But the CEO of the hospital says whatever the number is, it's a small number. And that they're not expecting any service disruptions at the Ottawa Hospital, cancellations of procedures or anything like that, because 99-point-something% of the staff are vaccinated at the Ottawa Hospital, which I think is just wonderful news. The last time this was in the news about a week ago, the number in the media was about 318. But the payroll at the Ottawa Hospital is like 12,000 people or so. This morning, we're going to jump back into the issue of mandatory vaccination with Warren Smokey Thomas. He's a big union leader in Ontario. He is the head of OPSEU, Ontario Public Service Employees Union. Has all told about 180,000 members or so in all sorts of jobs. OPSEU members work in healthcare and long-term care and in the school system, universities, colleges, jails, liquor stores. Big union, lots of members. It has been telling those members that an employer can bring in a mandatory vaccine policy as long as it doesn't violate specific language in a bargaining unit's collective agreement. But we'll ask Smokey Thomas about mandatory vaccination policies, how they affect OPSEU members, and intern public services in Ontario, and a few other things. Premier Ford plans to hire new inspectors for long-term care homes and give those new inspectors new powers. The whole issue of long-term care inspectors and whether they were up to the job in the earliest days of the pandemic when long-term care was so hard hit, you may remember that was a source of considerable friction between Smokey Thomas and Premier Ford. And as well, we'll have to ask Smokey about all the so-called labor-friendly or worker-friendly legislation that has been introduced by the Premier and his labor minister, Monty McNaughton, in recent weeks. Last week, there was a lot of speculation about what the Trudeau government was going to do and whether the Trudeau government really would appeal a federal court decision to uphold compensation for First Nations children and families. They were awarded compensation because of an underfunded First Nations child welfare system. Now, I just happen to note that in the run-up to this deadline to announce this decision, whether to appeal this ruling or not, that the Prime Minister was out of the country with this deadline looming. I was just wondering if there was anything you could read into that. He's been taking a lot of heat recently for his commitment or lack of commitment to reconciliation. And here he is. This deadline is looming. Big decision to announce he's not in the country. Read into that what you will. Because, as it turns out, the deadline arrives, and what does the government do? Announces, yes, we are going to appeal. We are going to appeal to the Federal Court of Appeal, but it did signal that the government is going to try and negotiate a settlement ahead of more court action. So we're going to get some reaction to the decision to appeal these human rights cases when we're joined once more by a lawyer working for the First Nations Child and Family Caring Society, which is at the forefront of one of these rulings. As long as there is no settlement to these cases, Prime Minister Trudeau continues to leave himself open to the very valid criticism that if he was really interested in advancing truth and reconciliation, he wouldn't be fighting First Nations children in court. But his government is. Aaron O'Toole, remember that guy? True Blue. Or not. He is back in the news this morning. He's taking heat from a former prime minister who actually made a campaign appearance with him during the most recent election campaign. Brian Mulroney was on one of the weekend political talk shows and said Aaron O'Toole should kick unvaccinated Conservative MPs to the curb. That's what leadership is about. Mulroney said O'Toole shouldn't be tiptoeing all around this issue of mandatory vaccinations for MPs, called it a no-brainer that MPs should be vaccinated, and that the leader of the party, my words, shouldn't really be wasting any more time on this issue, any more time straddling the fence, walking the fine line, talking about the minute details about the Board of Internal Economy. That's what it goes like. The Board of Internal Economy of the House of Commons. Just kick the MPs out and be done with it. When can we characterize this issue as the stinking albatross around Aaron O'Toole's neck? So we're going to get into that issue and a few more things, like Jim Watson's political future. Will Jim Watson run for mayor again? We'll be joined by strategic communications and crisis communications expert Barry McLaughlin from transformleaders.ca. A big topic on the Rob Snow Show this morning has to be climate change. It's the biggest story in the world right now, the COP26 climate conference. You know how many journalists are there, David, covering this thing? Almost 4,000. Almost 4,000. Climate change, COP26, the big climate change conference underway, Glasgow, Scotland. Major focus for us on a few fronts. We'll have Jeffrey Johnston. This is right up his alley, international affairs columnist, Kingston Whig Standard. And I hope you'll have your say as well about this global climate gab fest that's underway. Speeches from all the world leaders. 400 private jets landing in Glasgow today. 400 private jets. The Prime Minister is there. Greta is there. U.S. President Joe Biden is there. Last somebody told him. President Xi of China, not there. China is the world's worst offender when it comes to so many things, but especially when it comes to the output of greenhouse gases, and not at this conference. President Putin is not there, instead being accused in the news media today of using natural gas as a weapon, reversing the flow of pipelines to key European markets because the European Union is dragging its feet on approving a new pipeline. So there are lots of subplots. But here at home, the environment and the economy, they go hand in hand, or do they anymore? We have record prices for gasoline, a Line 5 issue that's not settled, the strongest inflation reading in almost 20 years. Interest rates, the Bank of Canada says, are going to go up. The cost of living is the dominant issue for Canadians, the top-of-mind issue for Canadians. But the Trudeau government's priority, it would appear, is the climate crisis, the climate emergency. The Trudeau government has new targets for reducing greenhouse gases, even though greenhouse gases have never gone down in the 6 years the Liberals have been in office. They have never gone down. But now, magically, the pledge is greenhouse gases will go down by as much as 45% in just the next 8 years. Fighting climate change is a major priority for this government. It's on full display. But I want to know, during our talkback hour, given all the other things that are going on, do you think this should be the major priority for our government, fighting climate change? Because at least right now it seems to be the priority. New targets for cutting greenhouse gases, a new and very activist environment minister, a new natural resources minister who used to be the environment minister. All of it prominently on display over the last week or so from this government. It's obvious. It's their priority file. But is it yours? Or do you think the government should focus on some other priorities? And if so, what? I want to get into that with you during the Talkback Hour this morning. We do it every morning between 10 and 11 o'clock. It's an hour of phone calls, an hour of opinions at 750-1310 on The Rob Snow Show on Monday, November 1st on City News.
Opening a business especially in a pandemic, in that kind of situation, is very challenging. First, people don't know me. People don't know my product. To build a new clientele, to build a trust for them, to show them that I care about it. I do love my food. That was the biggest challenge. And of course, in all lockdown, we had to face it regards my employee, girls, ladies, what they work for me. I didn't want to tell them, sorry, I'm closed, I'm not having a job for you. No, they have families, they have kids to feed. So this is very important because we are family orientated. And we decided to open. We, of course, essential business. So been very tough, very, very tough, as we didn't see people on the road. Market was completely quiet, but we knew it that we have to wait, and we knew it that we're gonna be fine. In this time, we built online shop, Vedel Online, and we did Uber Eats, which one is picking up and is very, very popular. We have a really good feedback. So this is the song for my heart. And and we try to expand. I'm thinking about opening another location. So I want to make Vedel famous. I want to make the Vedel place to be for all the families with kids. Try the traditional food, what the grandparents cooked in the countries when they're from, or even Canadian people. They're more than welcome to come and try our famous pierogis. I try to be passionate about my food, organic food, food made with love, with all homemade, organic. So you can find food from all over the Europe: Polish, German, Ukrainian, Romanian, French, Armenian. So all kind of different types of food. Homemade lunches. We focus on the homemade lunches, grandma style. I keep always saying, like in my Genia babcia house, how she cooked. I wanted this love and this food over here because I believe that would bring all people around me. And all the organic cold cuts, lovely selection of sausages, cheeses, European cheeses, great selections of mustards, French cookies. All what you need from Europe you can find here at the Vedel Touch of Europe. If you think good way, that's it. You have to. I had the option to cry in the corner and say, oh, pandemic is coming. No, you need to stand up and fight for it and have your eyes open, think outside of the box, and do it.
On Rogers TV and City News,
101.1 FM
and 1310 AM.
It's coming up here shortly. David Taylor with the First Nations Child and Family Caring Society. He was with us last week ahead of the deadline day from the federal government on whether to appeal the First Nations child welfare ruling. The government is going to appeal, but work on negotiations behind the scenes. So Mr. Taylor is going to join us. He's a lawyer. Warren Smokey Thomas, president of OPSU, right after the 9:30 news, along with Barry McLaughlin, senior partner at transformleaders.ca. We'll talk about the mayor's political future, the Ottawa Police Service, and its flip-flop on its mandatory vaccination policy, Aaron O'Toole, and we might even talk a little bit about U.S. politics this morning. There's a very closely watched race for governor happening in Virginia, and maybe some of you say, well, who cares? Well, this is a bellwether for midterm elections, and Virginia is a state that Joe Biden won by 10 points over Donald Trump in 2020. It's supposed to be a solid blue, solid Democrat state, but this election is too close to call, and some people are using terms like disaster. This is a disaster for the Democrats in the making here. Jeffrey Johnston, Kingston Whig Standard on COP26, David Sally from the Ottawa Business Journal, and a lot of coverage this morning about COP26, which is getting underway today in Glasgow. And David has a little taste of what is actually going on there right now.
Even then, might only be met in 2023. On adaptation finance remains only at 25%. Not the 50-50 split that was promised nor needed given the warming that is already taking place on this earth. Climate finance to frontline small island developing states declined by 25% in 2019. Failure to provide the critical finance and that of loss and damage is measured, my friends, in lives and livelihoods in our communities.
So we'll have a little bit more of that this morning, coverage on this morning, with the help of the Canadian Institute for Climate Choices. Dale Bagan is going to join us. He is Vice President of Research and Analysis there, and is actually going to be in Glasgow at some point, if not later today. And Money Monday with Peter Fraser, Certified Financial Planner from Cardinal Planning and Manulife Securities. And I think today is the day we're talking about, the government wants you to go green and incentivizes you by way of a myriad of tax credits to help you go green. So Peter is going to go over some of the kind of tax goodies that are out there if you want to, quote unquote, green your home, do energy efficient retrofits and those sorts of things. All right, so let's get right into it. David Taylor joins us once more. He is a lawyer with the First Nations Child and Family Caring Society. Good morning.
Good morning.
So we spoke last week, and now we know more or less what's going to happen. The federal government made it known late last week that it is going to appeal the federal court ruling on First Nations child welfare. So what is your reaction to that?
Well, I can't say that I was necessarily surprised, but I sure can say I was certainly disappointed. Anytime you've got a significant legal ruling like this, which has an impact on so many children and families across the country, it's always a disappointing thing to hear that there's going to be more litigation as opposed to just the government doing the right thing and implementing the orders.
Okay. So what happens now?
Well, now we're in a period essentially where the litigation is on pause. The government has come forward and said they want to have some very focused discussions with us over the next 6 weeks about the compensation issue, but also and frankly more importantly about long-term reform of the system. And I say more importantly, not to diminish compensation, but really the whole reason the Caring Society brought this complaint was to end the discrimination against children and families and to stop this kind of cycle from continuing through future generations. And so compensation is obviously an important part of that, because children and families who have already been through the system, even if we have the best system coming out of this, which is what the Caring Society's goal is, that doesn't make up for those lost childhoods at home and those lost relationships between parents and children. So certainly it's very important to have victims be compensated, but equally and even more important, going forward and stopping this in the future. And that was really we think of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in 2015, their top calls to action were to fix the child welfare system. And so it was the case, with residential school survivors, and I'm sure the case with those who've been through the system, tragically afterwards, that the kids born today don't continue to face this discrimination going forward.
So it's not just about money and that round number $40,000, right? Maximum of $40,000. You want reforms of the system.
That's
and
right.
And kind of guarantees from the government that it's committed to making those reforms.
That's right. It's ending the discrimination and making sure it doesn't reoccur. And it's so important to shift the system from one which is really, the emphasis for a long time has been on placing First Nations kids living on reserve in care, because that's the easiest place for the government to give them services based on how their funding is structured. And we need to change that funding to be more prevention-based, to stop intervening after it's too late, to take a preventive approach, and really also to address those key drivers that are leading to higher rates of kids coming into care in First Nations communities.
So, Mr. Taylor, in 2019, the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal ordered the federal government, to pay a statutory maximum of $40,000 to victims unnecessarily taken from their communities, placed in foster care, because of, quote, racist and inequitable federal funding practices. How did that manifest itself?
So the way it manifested itself, like I was saying, was essentially they would pay for expenses in foster homes at 100% of the cost, and there wouldn't be money for prevention. So, you could have a family that through, no fault of its own, because of systemic poverty issues on reserve, didn't have enough resources for food. And instead of giving the family, some money for grocery carts to get them through, the crisis, or, some other food assistance that way, the children will be removed from the home and then placed in a foster family. Or you might have a child with medical needs, who needed a medical bed that could, be inclined so that they could sit up, because maybe they had breathing issues or other issues, and they wouldn't pay for that bed in mom and dad's home, but they'd pay for it in a foster home. And so because of this, it was what the tribunal called a perverse incentive for social workers to take First Nations kids into care, because First Nations kids would have needs, and the social workers would say, okay, well, I can meet this need in a foster home, but I can't meet it in mom and dad's home. And that's where you'd really see this manifestation of this really discriminatory system, because that's not something that non-First Nations kids faced, because off reserve, there are still problems in that child welfare system too, but it's at least one that for the last 20 or 30 years has had this idea of prevention first. Take these least intrusive measures, try and help kids in the home, and that's something that until recently has not existed at all in the on-reserve child welfare system.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Taylor, for this morning and explaining it once more to our audience.
Thanks for your interest.
Yep, David Taylor, lawyer, First Nations Child and Family Caring Society. This is the Rob Snow Show on City News.
one for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Monday, November 1st. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, 5 degrees. In Smith Falls, 6. Here's what's making news this hour. Ottawa paramedics have updated the balcony collapse that they responded to on Frank Street off Elgin. It was just before 10 last night. Emergency crews were called to the 200 block of Frank. Multiple people suffered injuries when the second-floor balcony at a 3-story apartment building collapsed with multiple people on it. Now, 7 were injured, 4 had to be taken to hospital, 3 others were assessed at the scene but refused a trip to hospital. All the 4 were taken to hospital, all in stable condition when they were handed off to hospital staff. Flu shots for the general public. They're being doled out at your local pharmacy as well as your doctor's office starting today. The province says anyone who wants a shot can get one. Last year, it was a very mild flu season with the stay-at-home orders and the like, but the province has upped the number of shots that are available this year. The Silver Cross mother who will lay a wreath next Thursday during the National Remembrance Day ceremony at the War Memorial is a Quebec woman. José Simard's daughter, Karine Blais, was killed when an IED exploded under the truck she was driving in Afghanistan in 2009. Blais was 21 years old. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson opening up the Global Climate Summit, saying the world is strapped to a doomsday device. Johnson likened the Earth's position to that of fictional secret agent James Bond, strapped to a bomb that will destroy the planet and trying to work out how to defuse it. He told leaders today we're in roughly the same position, but now the ticking doomsday device is real, not fiction. City News Time, 9:32. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
He's the opinionated Ottawa icon.
The Rob Snow Show returns
On Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Always great to have our next guest on the Rob Snow Show. Warren Smokey Thomas is the president of OPSEU. Good morning.
Good morning, Rob. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good, thanks.
Good. For people who are not familiar with your union, you have members working in all sorts of different professions all across Ontario, such as healthcare, right? Healthcare, hospitals.
Yep.
Long-term care.
Yep.
Jails.
Yep.
Education.
Yep.
Right, in the schools.
Right, in the schools, yeah.
In the schools, universities, colleges, LCBO, right? Your members are in the LCBO, so I'm probably missing a few as well.
Well, our members register your birth, your death, and we have a hand in your life everywhere along the way, whether it be in developmental services or, so we have the widest reach of any union in Ontario.
Right,
in terms of occupations we represent.
So if you could describe the vaccination policies across, all these vast varied workforces, how would you describe the vaccination policies put in place by the employers? Is it a patchwork? Is it uniform? What is it?
No, definitely a patchwork, and everything ranging from no jab, no job to no jab. If you're not vaccinated, it's like City of Toronto workers facing 6-week suspensions today, to what I believe are more reasonable positions in Ontario Public Service, and some people won't like this, but this is the Doug Ford government. They're using what's called attestation. So they'll take you at your word, but if something happens and, if what they found out after there's no break or something you're lying, well, I don't think any union, including my own, will be able to save you for lying. So that seems to be a much more reasonable approach. And if I could I think part of this is the distrust. I think right from the start of the pandemic, the communications has been botched. The science was changing daily. Media, especially TV, they had different so-called experts on every day. And frankly, some of it was fear-mongering, and I think, and sensationalized, and that might not win me any friends in the TV world, but it really did help to create, not just that, but help to create mistrust of the whole process. And then you have employers who, said denied it was a problem, wouldn't provide PPE. So, that and a whole host of other issues generated, for some people, a deep distrust in their employers. So here we finally get a vaccine, and you have this distrust that's been generated. I think the vast majority of Ontarians have been able to get over that, but some haven't. And some just don't believe in vaccines for a whole host of reasons. I don't think it does anybody any good to belittle them, to mock them, to do that sort of thing. I like the education approach, reason, and have people think about it. But so it's really all over the map. I don't have a solution to offer for people, but if employers and unions where you're unionized could sit down and work it out, we've been able to do that in a lot of workplaces, right? Work it out to a more reasonable solution.
Okay, so has it been a big issue that you've had to confront as a union leadership?
Oh, yeah. It's big for all of us, yes.
Yeah.
I have the anti-vaxxers, some of them, are praying I die, and they're going to come urinate in my grave, and all the way to, can somebody just please tell me the truth? And I think that's part of the problem, right? Some people, I think, you'll never convince. The polling shows 7% of Canadians are just simply anti-vaxxers. I don't know what you do with that crowd. They're the people that won't get their kids vaccinated to go to school, that sort of stuff. And there's about 10% that are what they call vaccine hesitant. I sit on a national table called Faster Together with about 300 groups and a company that's doing a lot of polling. And Hassan Youssef, who's now a senator, he's a co-chair as well. So I think we're making progress. And I would not want to be an employer or the government in this particular case. So you take a hard line if you're a hospital and you say if you're not vaccinated, you're not coming to work, but you're already facing, some pretty severe staff shortages. So how do you find that balance in there? How do you get to people to say, listen, trust the science? Like I'm double vaccinated. I absolutely trust the science. No, I trust the science, so I'll trust the science table. And so that science table in Ontario, and even the federal one. I mean, I know there are a lot of missteps along the way, but they've got a pretty good handle on it now. I mean, my second youngest son, he took all this stuff in college and university, so I mean, he's pretty grounded and pretty knowledgeable, and can explain it in simple terms. And I think that's what we need here. Just help us understand it all, right?
So let's move on to something else then, because I do remember it was a source of friction between you and the Premier in the very earliest days of the pandemic, when the Premier questioned the commitment of inspectors going into long-term care homes. Well, now the Premier has promised an overhaul of the whole inspection business for long-term care homes, including the hiring. Basically, they want to double the number of long-term care home inspectors. So what should be part of a reform package when it comes to inspections for long-term care homes?
Yeah, so the employer, Ford did say, inspectors were refusing to go in, just refresh people's memories, and I phoned him up and said, that's not true. I sent him proof it wasn't, and he apologized the next day on TV, so I give him credit for that. And I give him credit for now, they are fixing it. So if you're in a long-term care home or you had a family member pass away, this might provide some sort of comfort, and if you're in there now, it should provide you a lot of comfort. So they're going to return to what they call the resident quality inspections that the Liberals got rid of, and he's doubling the number of inspectors. So there's going to be almost 400 in total. Some of them will be clerical that do file the legal work and stuff like that, and some will actually be real investigators for more serious cases. So he's rebuilding that part of the system, and that is absolutely necessary. Inspectors will be able to just show up and not be refused entry. They will, because the regularly scheduled ones, well, you get ready, you clean it all up, you make sure you got enough staff on, all that kind of stuff. People criticize that, but they're still very, very important.
Yep.
And if I might, the one thing I have asked the minister to consider is that long-term care homes have to create co-op placements for healthcare students. So whether you're going to be a PSW, which the government's already mandated, RPN, RN, physiotherapist, occupational therapist, respiratory therapist. All these places, colleges need places for students to go. And when students go in, I worked at the psych hospital my whole life, and we always had students, and students really keep you on your toes because they ask a lot of questions. And so Rob, the minister, he thinks that's a good idea. So he is well on the way to fixing it. For the critics that say, well, he's not going to hire them till after June, that's not true. They're in the process of doing the postings now to hire. Okay. And it's pretty extensive training. It's at least 6 weeks, and it'll be modeled after the Ministry of Labor model. And he brought the Ministry of Labor inspectors in to help our long-term care inspectors in the interim. So he really has stepped up and to fix it. And for all the critics out there, I say, partly you don't know what you're talking about, and but he is fixing it, and he's doing it the right way. He's doing it the way that my union, I get my information from the front line, how to rebuild it. I gave it all to him, and he's doing exactly what my frontline workers said he should do.
Okay. What do you think about the criticism that too many of the new beds or the homes that have to be retrofitted and the beds in there, that too many of those are being awarded to private sector home operators? What do you think about that criticism?
No, I do. My basic philosophy is public services should be for people, not profit. So I personally think they should reduce the level of private homes, and I keep advocating for public versus over private. But again, it's nothing is as simple as people think. You have people demanding they just revoke the licenses to these homes. Well, if they got 200 residents in there, where are you going to take them? Now, he's putting in the legislation where they can send a supervisor in and take the home over. Now, that's a very good interim step to reforming the whole system, because you're not going to fix this system in a year, 2 years, 3 years. It's a multi-year fix, right? Because it's a huge system. You got to hire thousands upon thousands of people, so you can't just kick these private operators out. But the inspections, the ability to fine them, the serious fines, send in a supervisor, take them over by law. That is a very, very good first step, and I'll keep lobbying for public versus private. I like homes run by the city, by the by the county, that kind of stuff. They're my favorite, I guess I'd say.
Okay. The Premier and the Labor Minister, Mr. McNaughton, are really pushing these so-called worker-friendly pieces of legislation, better recognition of foreign credentials, for one, the right to disconnect, these sorts of things. What do you think about some of the proposed legislation coming from the Ford government that are so-called worker-friendly?
They are worker-friendly.
They are worker-friendly? Okay.
For sure. If
such as then, Smokey.
Well, the right to unplug.
Yeah.
So we now live in a virtual world. I don't get me wrong. I work 7 days a week, answer emails and phone calls all days there. But I knew that signing up. But a lot of people go into the workforce, and now with with going to the digital world, your boss is sending you emails at 9, 10 at night, and you're expected to respond. Well, you're off. Like, you need to have time off. And, for the media world, I had a reporter say to me, well, I work long hours. I said, yeah, but you knew that when you signed up. And they said, true enough, you know when you signed up. So I think that's kind of legislation is long overdue. And again, I think that there's more to do. And I think that Monty's looking at more stuff, because he has talked to a lot of labor leaders about what our problems are, and employer groups. Mm-hmm. So these are things that are designed to make people's lives better, and at least give you a break from the office. Do you know what I mean? You can actually put the phone down and not be expected to check in your emails at night when you're finished work at 5, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I guess coming next is something for gig workers, Uber drivers, and when it comes to gig workers, Uber drivers, at the very least, basic protections, CPP, EI, vacation pay. I mean, this is not over-the-top stuff here that we're talking. These are basic worker protections, workplace safety, overtime, minimum wage.
They're all reasonable things.
Very reasonable,
the vast majority of workers enjoy. But so these new companies that are, make tremendous amounts of money, obscene amounts of money, I would submit, skirt all those laws because these kind of workers aren't covered. So I think it's up to the labor movement to win some charter challenge, win the cases to have them be declared employees, and then go after instead about unionize them and make their lives better. Now, a smart employer would say, you know what, we're going to do everything that other workers are entitled to by law, and we'll go a little bit above and treat workers good. Then they wouldn't be constantly under attack. But and the working conditions. I've talked to. Where I have an apartment in Toronto for during the week, and I've seen these delivery folks come in there, and like 10 o'clock at night, and I said, boy, you work long days. It started at 7 a.m., still going, and no overtime, no nothing, right? So, that's just wrong. Like, that's not fair in today's world.
Okay. Thank you, Smokey Thomas. Be well. Thank you again. Bye-bye.
You, Rob.
Yep.
Be well.
Warren Smokey Thomas is the president of OPSU. Barry McLaughlin, senior partner, transformleaders.ca. Coming up next on the Rob Snow Show on City News.
This affected us big time because when, you know how we are season, we have clothes for the spring, clothes for the winter. That time, lots of clothes didn't arrive on a time from Europe or from here because some factory shut down. So, and this put us in an odd position. We received not all the merchandise, part of the merchandise, and people. And for us, we have to be careful, especially with the virus going on. Did affect the business, of course, like everybody else. We're not immune, and since the government helped, this did a little bit good for us too, but still affected all the sectors, especially clothing. You can see big corporation affected bad because nobody was thought it's gonna be like this. Earthquake might happen. We joke about it before. Think it might happen, but this was like a third war, but with a virus. So how to survive? That's the question, and we're doing our best to work with the mall, especially rent in a mall is very high. The government. They have certain, let's say, condition, like how many people will be in the mall or in the stores, etc. Yeah, it's a big factor. But of course, if my store has a back doors, or just will be better, it will be much better. At least we can have curbside much easy, because we have to shut down completely, And this left a mark on us, on everybody too. People always ask me, go online. Certain things you can't go online. Let's say T-shirt, certain product people don't know how to fit. But when it comes to clothing, it's different completely. Let's say I have a customer comes, you can give him 44, but certain suit he might take 42, certain suit he might take 46. So, and how could, suit is not gonna fit the same. And I see people come back and they show me what they got online and not the same fabric. Mostly young people, but if you really want to shop, you have to go to the store because everything will be around you. You want to be sure the color look good, the fit will look good, especially when you spend, doesn't matter how much money, whether 300 or 2,000, You have to try, you have to see what's going on. Please don't be shy, contact us. It will be a pleasure for me to take a suit or coat or anything. Like sometimes people have a funeral, or they have things, they have a wedding, they don't want to come to the mall. If I get all the information, I will go and meet them at their home or their business offices. I'm gonna start doing that, and this will help the business and help the people. Like they're afraid to come to the mall for time being, or they're too busy at work. They cannot go anywhere at certain time, so I'm glad to do that.
Strong voice.
Strong opinions.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Welcoming back Barry McLaughlin, transformleaders.ca. Barry's
Good morning,
fellow.
Rob.
Good morning, Barry. Barry's a fellow at Carleton's Masters of Political Management, adjunct professor, Shannon School of Business, Cape Breton University. We reached him last week in Cape Breton. Not sure where he is today, but
I'm back in Ottawa.
Back in Ottawa. Dressed as Joe Biden for Halloween, I see on Twitter.
Right.
Is that right, eh? Okay.
No malarkey here. That's right. Well, every year I do some political figure. I did 2 years in a row of Trump. I've had enough of him. So
Okay. Yeah, probably best to move on from that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But have you ever dressed up like Jim Watson for Halloween?
I never have.
No?
No. I'm not sure I know how to do that.
Okay. I spoke to the mayor on Thursday, and he said he'll let people know by the end of the year what his decision is on running again. Now, he turned 60 this year. His 12th year as mayor post-amalgamation, because he was mayor for a time before amalgamation, right? Light rail is a legacy project that's not working out very well. Bob Chiarelli's already said, I'm going to run even if Mayor Watson is running. There are other people who will want to run but may wait and find out if Jim is in, and that will go a long way into determining whether they're going to be in. So what do you think he's weighing at this point of it, Jim Watson, on his re-election?
Well, I think the number one thing for every politician is, do I still have the fire in the belly? You got to have the fire in the belly. If you don't, please don't run. And I think that's a serious question. I mean, he's done it for so long, as you say, without really a lot of opposition. I mean, once he became mayor, I mean, the earlier city, let alone the amalgamated city, he's a very good politician. He still has control over council. He's still able to mostly keep his agenda, but you are right, he's wearing the LRT issue, and until that's really resolved in some reasonable way, it's hanging a huge question mark over, his re-electability. I think the other thing to look at is, Jim Watson is not known to have other, hobbies. He's only interested. He's already been a political leader. He's been a minister in a Liberal government in Queen's Park. He didn't apparently like living in Toronto. He loves Ottawa. I think that he's going to, in the end, I see him running again. I do.
You do?
I don't think he's going to run away from a fight. Let's put it that way.
Right. Okay. Yeah. It'll be interesting to see which way he's leaning, because another thing is he's been a loyal Liberal. Yeah. So if he says at the end of the year, I'm not running again, the thinking is they'll find a place for him.
No, I don't think he's done that. He was head of the Canadian Tourism Commission.
Yeah, right.
He's been there, done that. And
done that. Okay.
He's actually had a lot of conservative supporters as mayor, which is interesting. He's been one of those mayors that has been able to pull across the spectrum more than you think. And so part of the reason is that there wasn't really a strong candidate running that would represent, let's call it, the right side of the ledger. So he's been careful not to alienate too many conservative voters in Ottawa. He's run a very careful, I think you'd call it a center-right government.
Oh, really?
In a way.
Okay.
Yeah, I would. He's not really run center-left. There's many, quote, progressives on council probably looking carefully to see what their chances are, because I think there'll be a candidate from the left side of the spectrum that will come in, and that'll help make it with Bob Chiarelli, and that it'll be a strong, I think, at least a three-way race.
Okay. All right. After a barrage of criticism, Ottawa Police Chief Peter Slowly changed course and announced that all members will have to be fully vaccinated by January 31st of next year. So they're taking their sweet time. But what did you think about the reversal?
Well, I think it had to be done. I mean, he had to bite the bullet and do it because, the mayor, a lot of people came out against it because you can't have rules for everybody else in the municipality except for the police, frontline police force not being vaccinated. I think it was an untenable position. And I think Chief Slowly did the right thing of saying, you know what, in the end, I'll give them an extension, but that's it. And I think we saw in New York with the fire, with the firefighters, I mean, there's like a lot of them are unvaccinated. They're out, picketing in the streets. They're out demonstrating. We're not going to have that in Canada, but I think there's a sign that for whatever reason, whether it's police or fire, there's a certain hesitancy about getting this vaccination done. And it's a little bit puzzling, but, I think Chief Slowly had to show leadership, and he did.
Former Prime Minister Brian Mulroney took aim at Aaron O'Toole in a televised interview this weekend. And remember, during the campaign, it was Brian Mulroney on stage with Aaron O'Toole at one campaign stop. But he said, quote, that if he was leader, he would require all of his MPs to roll up their sleeves and receive the COVID vaccine. It's a no-brainer, end quote. What do you think about that criticism?
Yeah, there was smoke coming out of the TV screen. I saw that. Wow. He, it was rare for him to do that, but he made it pretty clear that like you said, it's not leadership. And leadership is actually, you have to make the tough decisions. I think it's a very strong warning sign to Mr. O'Toole that he better stop playing footsie with this and get her done. And he's not going to, if he's trying to appeal to everybody, whether it's his caucus or whether the party, it's not going to work. He needs to show, you know what, we've been there, we've done that. There's still a principle with regard to, how this decision was taken, but nevertheless, he has decided to honor the speaker's direction and the committee's, direction on this. However, I think he needs to be able to, get a strong platform to advance the issues that Canadians care about. And this is getting in the way. This is getting in the way. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. It's a distraction.
Yeah, a distraction. Well, I know you are a keen observer of U.S. politics. And one of the big stories in U.S. politics this week is the race for governor in Virginia. Why is this worth paying attention? Why is this making so much news in the United States, Barry?
Yeah, well, Virginia is one of those states that, used to be really a Republican kind of, red state, but then it became a blue state gradually. And, it's kind of strange that, and I think it follows, it's a bellwether state now in the sense that, if you're going to get you're going to have any re-election problems, or if you're going to have problems in the midterms, Virginia is a real sign of how you're going to do. And Glenn Youngkin, the Republican, really has come to a neck-and-neck race with Terry McAuliffe, the Democrat. He's a longtime Democrat. I think part of the untold story there is, he was governor. McAuliffe was a campaign manager for Bill Clinton.
That's right. Yeah, long time. Yeah.
And so he attracted a lot of negatives. He wasn't the perfect candidate. However, he is the candidate. Biden knows this is important. He's gone into the state. Notice Youngkin is keeping Trump out of the state. He doesn't want Donald Trump campaigning with him. So he is a Republican, Trump light, but he knows there's damage to his campaign if he brings Trump in. He doesn't really seem to need him. The northern part of the state is, very much the suburbs of Washington, D.C., tends to go Democrat. It's the southern part of the state, mid and southern part of the state, that tends to be turning Republican. And funny enough, it's about an education issue, about burning books. And McAuliffe saying, Youngkin wants to burn books. And, it's a strange issue, which normally doesn't at all lead, but I think it shows you the COVID kind of divisions that have taken place in America, and Virginia is right at the heart of that. So if the Democrats lose this,
it means they can lose anywhere, really, right?
They can lose anywhere, and it's being tied to Biden's falling popularity, and he's going to have to wear it.
Interesting. We'll be watching it. Barry, thanks so much for this week. Always great.
My pleasure.
Talk
Rob.
soon. Yep.
Right.
Barry McLaughlin from transformleaders.ca. Okay, coming up, we'll be talking about COP26, climate change, government priorities at 750-1310 on the Rob Snow Show on City News.
1011 FM in Smith Falls and the Valley. Number 1 for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 1011 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Monday, November 1st. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, 5 degrees, 6 in Smith Falls, and here's what's happening, making news in Ottawa and the Valley. The COP26 climate conference formally opened in Glasgow. It was British Prime Minister Boris Johnson opening the summit, saying the world is strapped to a doomsday device, and he reminded world leaders of their past promises to make meaningful change.
All those promises will be nothing but blah, 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 to coin a phrase. And the anger and the impatience of the world will be uncontainable unless we make this COP26 in Glasgow the moment when we get real about climate change.
Now, notable absences from the Glasgow Climate Summit, leaders of China, Russia, and Turkey. 7 people treated for injuries when a balcony multiple people were on last night collapsed. Paramedics were called to Frank Street off Elgin just before 10 o'clock last night. A group was on a small second-story balcony of a 3-story apartment building when it went crashing to the ground. 4 of the people were taken to hospital, 3 others treated at the scene, but refused a trip for additional care. The 4 taken to hospital, all in their 20s. 1 man suffered a fracture. The others, 2 women and 1 man, were complaining of chest and back pain. City News Time, 10:01, and now the forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
Some showers are possible today, otherwise sun and cloud, the high 10 degrees, a gusty west wind. Tonight, mainly clear down to 2, and tomorrow some showers, mainly for the afternoon and evening, but could see some flurries mixing in Tuesday night as well, the high near 9. For today, the high 10.
And right now, 5 degrees in Ottawa, 6 degrees in Smith Falls. On the day, all hospital staff at Ottawa Hospital had to show their proof of COVID vaccine or be suspended without pay. 23 staff members at CHEO have been fired for not getting the shots. In a release, the hospital says it included 9 full-time staff, 14 part-time and casual employees. The Children's Hospital has nearly 4,000 staff members, which works out to 99.4% of total staff did choose to be vaccinated. City News Time, 10:02. The battle for control of Rogers Communication, parent of this radio station, makes his way to BC Supreme Court today.
Today's hearing in Vancouver stems from a petition filed by family member Edward Rogers last week that asks the court to declare legitimate a board he formed after being ousted as chair last month. The son of the telecom giant's late founder, Ted Rogers, claims he has the power to fire and appoint board members because he is chair of the Rogers Control Trust, which holds voting control through its ownership of 97% of the company's Class A shares. His mother, 2 sisters, and their associates say Edward Rogers' board is illegitimate and that the only valid board is the one that existed prior to his changes. Karen Rebo, The Canadian Press.
City News Time, 10:03. The Royal Canadian Legion Poppy campaign, bringing back payments from tap-enabled devices or cards, as well as digital poppies that can be purchased online and shared on social media. It's in addition to the more than 34,000 traditional poppy boxes across the country where people can donate cash and receive their poppy. Veteran and one organizer says there are few people handing out poppies from his branch this year compared to pre-pandemic times, but they will have the same mission as always, raising money to support veterans and veteran assistance programs. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Talk back.
Hello. On the Rob Snow Show. The phone lines are open at 613-750-1310.
Now, the Rob Snow Show continues.
Everything continues until it doesn't. Fighting climate change is the major priority for the Trudeau government right now. Wouldn't you agree? But do you think fighting climate change should be the major priority for the federal government right now? Or should the government have other priorities? And if so, what are those priorities for you? At 750-1310, 750-1310, 613-750-1310. When you think about And I get it. Government can walk and chew gum at the same time. We would like to think so. Anyway, when you think about all the things that government could be working on your behalf, is climate change the number one priority for you right now at this particular moment in your life? Yes or no? Why not? If you don't think climate change should be a major priority for the government right now, what do you think a major priority for the government should be? This is where I want to begin with the Talkback Hour this morning, because it is going to command the news this week. Climate change is going to be the news story of the week. All over the news because of this COP26, the big climate change conference that is getting underway in a big, big way in Scotland. It's like the opening of the Olympics, for crying out loud, to watch this thing. The Prime Minister is there today. U.S. President Joe Biden is there today. Vladimir Putin of Russia is not there. President Xi of China skipped it. I guess they have better things to do. Our new Environment Minister, Mr. Guilbeault, is there. And a little later, he will be joined by the new Natural Resources Minister, Jonathan Wilkinson. He used to be the Environment Minister. They're the dynamic duo. So, of course, they're going to be a COP26 now. Obviously, climate change is very high on this government's agenda. It has new climate change targets for reducing greenhouse gases. Very aggressive. Even though, as a government, the Liberals have never, ever, ever, I repeat, ever, 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 been able to reduce greenhouse gases in this country during their entire 6 years in office. It's never been done. But now it will be, they say, and the new target is to cut greenhouse gas emissions almost in half, by as much as 45% by the year 2030, which is a little more than 8 years from now. And it says Canada will be net zero by the year 2050. So, in other words, for every ton of greenhouse gas emitted into the atmosphere, 1 ton will have to be sucked out of the atmosphere from somewhere else. Net zero. And you know this government is a big believer in carbon taxes. And the current carbon tax is $40 a ton. It goes up to $50 a ton next year, and eventually it will hit $170 a ton. And the claim from the government is, it's the government's claim. Whatever you think of it may be something different entirely, but the government claims whatever you pay in carbon tax over the course of the year, you will eventually get it all back at tax time through the Climate Action Incentive. That is the rebate program that they put into effect at the same time they put in the price on pollution, because they don't like to call it carbon tax. But if you are lucky to get a rebate at tax time, this is part of the rebate, the Climate Action Incentive. That the claim from the government is, whatever you pay in carbon tax, you don't feel a thing. It's the best tax ever. You'll make more money at the end of the year. Best tax ever. Some people do dispute that is actually the case, but I don't really want to go down that rabbit hole right now. What I want to get into is this. The election has been held. The voters have decided. The Liberals hung on, okay? They won a minority parliament. It took more than a month to swear in the cabinet. The cabinet has been sworn in. It will be another 3 weeks before Parliament resumes, and then Parliament will be back for a few weeks and then break for Christmas and won't be back until the end of January next year. This is the government's priority right now. Has to be obvious to anybody who's watching, paying attention. Fighting climate change. Or at least appear to be moving heaven and earth to fight climate change. The appointment of Mr. Guilbeault, jarring in some circles, given his history as an environmental radical. Now he's in charge of the whole department, for crying out loud. And in the meantime, back on the home front, there's the pandemic. There are calls for investments in the billions into the healthcare system. There's long-term care. On the employment front, there's the labor shortage. There are supply chain problems. There are big-time worries about the cost of living, higher inflation readings that we haven't seen in 20 years. Last time I checked, houses aren't getting any cheaper. Interest rates are going up. The Bank of Canada told us that last week. There are all of these issues, in other words, not to mention the size of the debt and the size of the deficit. But the Trudeau government is very focused on climate change right now. This is a major priority for this government. Do you think it should be a major priority for this government? 750-1310, 750-1310, 613-750-1310. To the phones, to the phones, to the phones. Bradley in Ottawa. Bradley, good morning. You're on City News.
Hey, Rob. I've actually just tuned in for the first time today. So
just for the first
I'm enjoying what I'm hearing.
Like first time ever?
Yeah, actually, I just found you guys on the AM dial.
On the AM dial?
Yeah, I was looking for news because I got sick of CBC, the mobile app.
Well, we are on FM too, 101.1 FM, 101.1 FM. Sound a lot better on FM than AM, 101.1.
Indeed.
Okay, yeah. So climate change. Climate change is, the government is obsessed about climate change. It's a big focus is on climate change, particularly because the COP is happening now, this COP26 climate change conference. But should it be this focused on climate change?
In my honest opinion, no. As you said eloquently this morning, there's many other issues at hand in this country. And for us to go rushing into, such a bureaucratic event, when there are so many more pressing things at home, like you've said, inflation. I myself am a middle class earner, as is my spouse.
Okay.
We have 3 kids, and even in our current situation, we're having, we've got fairly stable jobs. She's in the beauty industry, and I'm in digital marketing.
Yep.
And we find it hard to make ends meet. We're fiscally responsible. We don't have a huge mortgage. Our kids, don't want for anything, but at the same time, we don't spend frivolously. And
Right.
I can't imagine how people are pulling it together right now, especially with the looming threat of inflation and rising mortgages and interest rates on everything, food costs. I mean, we've looked at our bill in the last 6 months, and we're just like, we've actually turned away from buying staples that we've traditionally bought. Like, we were at Costco a few weeks ago and looked at, a side of beef, and we're just like, there's no way we're paying almost $200 for this.
I went through that very experience this weekend at the Metro. I was like, I'd really like to get a roast. I'll do a roast. And then I looked at the price of the roast. There's only 2 of us in the house. And I was like, yeah, don't think so. No.
Right. And
can't justify it. Yeah.
These are issues, issues at the cash register that every Canadian is facing, no matter what their income is. And, I have friends that are in, you would consider them upper class earners, and they're just balking at some of the increases we've seen in the last 6 months. My partner's industry was particularly hard hit from COVID and, because of all the lockdowns and inconsistencies in governance. And
capacity limits hurt in that industry, right? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and she was actually shut down. Her business is on the Quebec side. She was shut down for, I think we added up, was 5 months of 2020.
Wow.
So, and CERB just was not cutting it even at that point.
Because there's a real risk here. I think there's a real risk here, Bradley, of the government looking out of touch.
Of course, and I think you hit the nail on the head. They definitely are. To the average Canadian, and a person who's even a little bit skeptical to begin with is pushed over the edge with the way they're currently governing. And I'll be honest, I didn't vote Liberal this time. I even thought about not voting at all because I just feel like my vote doesn't matter in the end. But I know a lot of people that did vote Liberal traditionally and voted Conservative this last election, and we're still very, very disappointed with the outcome, and in particular, I'm sort of diverging here, but conservative leadership as well.
Okay. Thank you, Bradley. Glad you found us and glad you called. Thank you. 750-1310. See, that's how I roll. On the Talk Back Hour right here on the Rob Snow Show on City News.
Here at the Thirsty Maiden, we offer a variety of products. So everything from breakfast items, so it's breakfast sandwiches and scones, which have become a staple item here at the cafe. We have an assortment of pastries and cakes and desserts. So we're really big on our dessert bar, which a lot of people come here for. And of course, our delicious coffee beverages. So we do offer not your typical lattes, things like a chocolate banana coconut latte, cinnamon coconut, which is my favorite, and our take on even a pumpkin spice, which we add nutmeg and a dash of cayenne in just to give it a bit of a kick. When you start a business, you don't factor in all the things that could go wrong. You think anything that goes wrong, any failure, it's got to be something on your shoulders. You didn't market right, you're carrying the wrong products, you didn't price your items correctly, all the things, right? But when this pandemic began, things going through my brain were I didn't factor in a pandemic. And we were just starting to grow. We were about to blow up, and I think I spent 2 days crying, and then I shut my business down for I think a period of 2 or 3 days. And just being at home during that time, I realized this is not me. Anybody that knows me knows I'm a hard worker. I don't give up, and I'm a go-getter. And I started to think, well, I should probably just start clearing out my freezers and posting and seeing who wants to buy what. And that was sort of how I built my momentum back up. I realized that there's still a large number of people that wanted to support us and were looking for the items that I had to provide. So we started there, then I reopened literally not even 3 or 4 days after I'd closed my doors, and then started doing curbside pickups and deliveries, started doing the deliveries myself, free deliveries to the local community, going as far as Bell's Corners and Carp as well. And that's why we're still here. This community has really kept us going a year into the pandemic. We've had a changeover of staff a couple times now, and situations change, and when you can't offer hours for your employees, you don't blame them when they have to go elsewhere. So I think that's also been one of the challenges is recruiting, training, and then they leave, and then bringing in more people and recruiting. And anybody in this industry will tell you that that's something we deal with on a regular basis, whether or not COVID's in the mix or not. But more so now, because every time there's a lockdown, there's a risk of, will we make it through? And then you lay off more staff. And again, their situations and their circumstances change.
It's time to talk back
on the Rob Snow Show.
Have your say and call now.
613-750-1310.
Climate change, biggest story of the week is going to be the biggest story of the week. Wait until we get to the end of the week. You won't believe the news stories that will have been done about the climate change file. And fighting climate change is certainly the major priority for the Trudeau government right now. But do you think fighting climate change should be the major priority for the federal government right now? Or should the government have other priorities at the top of its list? And if so, what are they? Our previous caller, Bradley, cost of living, number one concern, 750-1310. Every single phone line is available there, so the wait won't be too long. I'm kind of surprised. I guess everybody's in with Greta these days. Or maybe they're in Glasgow, Scotland, too. David, maybe all our callers are part of the delegation that we've sent over to Glasgow.
Thousands and thousands and thousands of people.
Like Armand, Armand in Ottawa. Maybe he's there. Downtown James.
I know Michelle in Ottawa South.
Michelle in Ottawa South. Ann in Ottawa. Roger in Drummond.
Big climate crusaders, those guys.
Keith and all those guys. Maybe the 750-1310. Climate change is a big news story because it is an obsession for the news media, especially this week. Not surprisingly, there are environment and climate change journalists from 30 countries. 30 countries, almost 4,000 news reporters are attending the climate change conference. Can you imagine? 4,000! 4,000! So of course the news media is filled with stories about climate change. They have 4,000 reporters on the beat covering the climate change talks. And David has a clip of Boris Johnson, UK Prime Minister. The BBC reports this morning, world, this is the headline, world at 1 minute to midnight over climate change, says UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson. Quote, the world is at 1 minute to midnight, having run down the clock on waiting to combat climate change, Prime Minister Boris Johnson has said. Speaking as world leaders arrive for the landmark COP26 climate change conference in Glasgow, Scotland, speaking to the BBC, Mr. Johnson said leaders need to move from aspiration to action to slow global warming. Estimates suggest 400 private planes had flown into Glasgow. This is UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson.
I was there with many of you in Copenhagen 11 years ago when we acknowledged we had a problem. I was there in Paris 6 years ago when we agreed to net zero and to try to restrain the rise in the temperature of the planet to 1.5 degrees. And all those promises will be nothing but blah, 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 to coin a phrase. And the anger and the impatience of the world will be uncontainable unless we make this COP26 in Glasgow the moment when we get real about climate change.
UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson, I think that's a nod to Greta, right? Greta said that, blah, blah, blah. Enough with the blah, blah, blah. All right, Manny's called in here, 750-1310. You're on City News. Manny, good morning.
Good morning, Rob. How are you?
I'm good. So it's a big priority for the Trudeau government, but is it a priority for you, Manny, fighting climate change?
Well, if anyone decides to look at the science, it's not a priority for Canada.
Okay.
The two biggest nations not at the conference are China and India. They represent about 3 billion people, and Asia now represents about 60% of all emissions, and they're not there. 3 billion people are not there. So now, on that...
Well, I know... Well, just hold on. Now, President Xi's not there from China, but Modi is there from India, but India has said it's not committed to net zero by 2050.
Right. And if you look at, I don't know, my problem is...
Canada and our population of, 40 million, we're committed to net zero by 2050, but what's that up against, the billion plus from India who are not committed to net zero by 2050?
And if you look at the last 10, 20, or since COP began, India and China have increased about 300%. America is down about 10%, and Canada is about 0% growth. So China and India, if you look, I don't know why we don't look at the science, but China and India, if you look at their trajectory in the last few years, they collectively are adding a total emissions of Canada every 6 months. So if we were to reduce our emissions by 25%, which we haven't done, we failed to do for now 10 years since Paris. We basically kept our emissions about the same, never reduced it. But if we assume that we reduce it by 25%, it will be swallowed up in a month by India and China, because you know what they are focused on? They are focused on getting their citizens out of poverty, out of death, out of complete misery. India's lifespan of their citizens is 15 years less than Canada because they don't have access to fossil fuels. So Modi and China are doing what they should be doing, and that is protecting their citizens and making sure that they're sitting. Now, here's another thing, Rob,
All right.
Now, there's a lot of brilliant Indian scientists, and there's a lot of brilliant Chinese scientists. Now, do you think that they believe we are at 1 minute to midnight, and they are intentionally killing all their citizens by increasing their emissions?
I don't know.
I'm going to use some liberal language, Rob. This is the height of white supremacy, where these wonderful white countries are telling these non-white countries how to conduct their lives, and all they want to do is live, enjoy prosperity, and that's what their leaders are doing.
Okay, interesting take. Interesting take as always, Manny.
Right.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Okay, let's go to Armand. There he is. Heard the call. Armand, you're on City News.
Well, I somewhat agree with climate change somewhat right now.
Somewhat,
okay.
Okay.
The priority is how the cost of living is killing us.
Yes,
Can't
okay.
you see what they're doing to us?
Right.
Climate change costs money, and we don't have money. We're broke.
Okay.
$1.45 a liter of gas. Start thinking about it, Mr. Trudeau, what's going on. You know what I mean? Like, come on.
Yeah, I don't get the sense that this government is really all that concerned about the price of gasoline right now. I think this government wants you to pay more gas, wants you to pay more for gas, and wants you to feel it, and think about the kind of vehicle that you're driving and think about the kind of lifestyle that you're living. I guess that's the ultimate goal.
That's what the goal is. But if you can't even afford to go buy a little car or whatever you need, if you haven't got any money, what the hell are you going to do?
Okay. All right, Armand, thank you. Okay. So, again, we're talking about COP26. It's underway now in a big, big way. 21,000 delegates, 13,000 observers, and just shy of 4,000 journalists. As, quote, this is the CNN headline. It's not 1 minute to midnight. It's world leaders meet for last best chance. The last best chance. COP26 climate talks in Glasgow. Quote, the sheer size of the COP26 conference means the event requires a huge amount of resources. So organizers are trying to make it as sustainable as possible to source food on the menu locally. Delegates are ferried around in electric buses, encouraged to walk or take public transport. Coffee is served in reusable cups. Oh, whippy! Temporary traffic lights that have been installed across Glasgow to manage traffic and ensure security are solar-powered, and hydro-treated vegetable oil is being used in generators instead of diesel. And in keeping... Listen to this, folks. In keeping with the sustainability theme, taps in the bathrooms are cold water only, which might be a questionable choice given the current coronavirus pandemic. End quote from CNN. Yeah, do you think so? This is the Rob Snow Show on City News.
in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Monday, November 1st. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, 7 degrees. Here's what's making news this hour. 4 people taken to hospital after a balcony collapse that happened on Frank Street. Emergency crews were called to that road just off Elgin around 10 o'clock last night. Now, the fire service would only say multiple people were on a small balcony on the second floor of an apartment building. 7 people did need treatment for various injuries from paramedics. Now, 4 had to be taken to hospital. 3 others were treated at the scene and didn't want or refused any further treatment. COP26 climate conference has formally opened in Glasgow on the heels of the G20 summit in Rome. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson says climate change is like a ticking doomsday device that will destroy the planet unless we can figure out how to defuse it. At the G20, our Prime Minister characterized that as a partial victory. Justin Trudeau admits it would have been nicer to see stronger language and commitments on climate change, but he says G20 leaders made progress, recognizing they have to strive to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. 422 new cases of COVID-19 in Ontario today. 38 of these cases are in Ottawa. There are 4 in Eastern Ontario, 1 in Renfrew, but no new cases today reported in Leeds, Grenville, Lanark. The province also says 3 more people have died from that virus in the last day. City News Time, 10:32. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Talk back.
Hello. On the Rob Snow Show. The phone lines are open at 613-750-1310.
Now, the Rob Snow Show continues.
Second half of the Talk Back Hour. Fighting climate change, going to be a big story this week. We're talking about it. It is the major priority right now for the Trudeau government. But do you think fighting climate change should be the major priority for the Trudeau government right now? Or should the government concentrate on other things right now? And if so, what are those things? 750-1310. A lot of frustration already about the price of gas. Meantime, I mean, when you have 4,000 journalists in one place, you can imagine the content that they're going to be pumping out every 5 minutes. Like this one, NBC News. Da, da, da. Prince Charles to call for warlike footing in climate change as world leaders gather. Quote, Prince Charles is set to call for a warlike effort as he opens a key UN climate summit on Monday. The heir to the British throne will help kick off the nearly 2-week COP26 meeting in Glasgow. President Joe Biden is arriving on Monday and joins representatives of more than 100 nations to hash out new targets to reduce emissions and put off the effects of climate change. Quote, we need a vast military-style campaign to marshal the strength of the global private sector. Charles plans to say, according to excerpts of comments sent to the media, we have to put ourselves on what might be called a warlike footing, he will say. So it's like 1 minute to midnight. Unless you have a bell phone, it's only 11 o'clock. 1 minute to midnight. 1 minute to midnight. Warlike footing. Warlike footing. Holy smokes. It's crazy, right? The language, the terms that they're putting it in. Ian in Brockville. Ian.
Oh, boy.
Yes. You feel like we're ready for it to go on a warlike footing.
I feel like the government needs to learn a lesson that I learned many moons ago, which is that debt has to be paid. So we have debt to be paid with lots of things. We have debt to be paid with our healthcare system. We have debt to be paid, sorry about that, we have debt to be paid with our First Nations. We have debt to be paid across the board, whether it's financial or restitution, anything, you name it. So as much as global warming sure should be the forefront of our thinking, when I buried my last business in debt, for an example, I couldn't just, I mean, you can if you want to go about the system that way, but for the most part, we need to own up to what we haven't finished already before embarking on new things. So I know it's kind of impossible for the government to, multitask and, do productive things and get a lot of stuff done like us normal people do in a 12-hour day. But at the end of the day, if we don't help Canadians stop having to pay what we're paying, whether it's a company like Caterpillar who's just killing the environment anymore by trying to build more and more plastic because it's cheaper and more cost effective, or the Ma and Pa juice company that's now switched from glass bottles to plastic bottles, or just guys like me who, the water bill and the whole water heater thing, that's getting a little bit pricey, but those paper plates at Walmart are still on for pretty cheap. So, hey, people upstairs, here's a thought. Let's get the First Nations taken care of. I truly think after all this time, maybe they deserve a little bit, just a little bit of something.
Okay.
Then maybe I think we should just finish helping out our last generation of people, making sure they're taken care of and making sure the people that take care of them are taken care of. And while we're doing all that, should we be able to multitask like big grown-up human beings? Let's get this climate change thing into gear here. But until we get the rest of the stuff solved, we're basically just, excuse my French, but peeing into the wind.
All right. Okay. I don't think that's French, actually. But nevertheless, point taken. Sharon in Ottawa, you're on City News. Good morning, Sharon.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Some of your previous callers have stolen my thunder, as people like to put it.
There's lots of thunder go around.
But my feeling is, first of all, it's been a climate emergency since they first started talking about it, and I think it might have been, was it the mid-90s? I guess I'm old enough to remember that kind of thing. Very little else, but I remember that. The thing is, and as the callers have been saying, our economy right now, because of the pandemic, because of this government's previous spending before the pandemic, we're sort of not well. Mm-hmm. And so now to ignore the economy and just go off, to these conferences, promise the world, who's going to pay for it? And even though they say, well, you get the money back, no, you don't actually. You may get some money back,
right,
if you're in the right income bracket. But, I mean, grocery shopping, buying gas, looking at the prices of things, and the carbon tax virtually does nothing. You still have to heat your home. You still have to, drive to work, most people.
Yeah.
So I think this government
You just pay more to do it. You just pay more to do it.
Exactly. And you know what? For some people, Prince Charles, for example, Justin Trudeau, it doesn't hurt them. They can say, we've got to declare war. Well, the poor beggar who's making just over minimum wage, having to drive to work because there's no bus that services where he works, can't afford food now, really. Check out the prices. It's all well and good for these people to get together, and yes, they're only getting cold water out of the taps, and the cars are running on used
the traffic signals are solar powered.
For God's sake. But how did they get there?
Right.
What bicycle route did Justin take to get to Glasgow?
The one from Rome, apparently. Yeah.
Oh, okay, that one, yeah.
Yes.
Well, he must be in shape because he probably took his.
Oh, he's in great shape. Look at him.
Too.
Look at him. He's in great shape. He looks great. Okay, I get you, Sharon. Thank you. 750-1310, 750-1310, 613-750-1310. Plenty of lines available for you. Dave Prescott. Dave, you're on City News.
Morning, Rob.
Morning, Dave.
I've got a couple things. This is just so misleading. We call it the hairy hand. What they do is they show you something because they don't want you to look at what's really going on.
Okay, what's really going on, Dave?
All sorts of stuff. Look at how bad the economy is. Look at the divide we have between people. All sorts of other things going on. But you look at this climate change nonsense. Is like, let's assume that they're trying to prevent a 1.5 degree increase, right?
That's what they're trying to do, preferably 1.5 degrees. Yes.
That's about 0.5% of the average world temperature. That makes no sense. Look in your house. It's only in the last couple years that we've been able to have sensors in our house that can keep your house within half or 3/4 of a percentage of your house temperature.
Okay. Well, what the science says, and you know, it seems to be a consensus, Dave. Okay, don't jump down my throat. Okay, is that it's never hold on. It's never been so hot so fast, and that it's our emissions of greenhouse gases that are causing it. It's human activity that is causing it. But you're not even willing to probably believe that, Dave, are you?
I don't at all.
You don't
My
at all.
Background
So
is
you're a denier, Dave. That makes you a denier.
No, it doesn't. It means that I'm actually someone who's gone out and looked at some of the numbers, some of the evidence.
Okay.
My background's engineering.
In engineering, okay.
You can't tell me some of this stuff like many physicists, but a lot of these physicists aren't allowed to talk. Like, look up William Happer, brilliant physicist, and he thinks this is a joke.
Well, whatever. How do you explain that? How do you explain then, Dave? How do you explain that? A headline like this one. This is a Bloomberg News headline today, okay? 2021 among Earth's hottest years, United Nations says as climate meetings start. And then it says the year 2021 is now expected to qualify among the hottest 7 years in history, all of them recorded since 2014. In other words, the 7 hottest years in Earth's history, recorded history, have been the last 7 years. How do you explain that?
And we believe everything that we hear on a lot of the paid-for news.
Okay.
How about things
But if the media was lying about that, if the news media was lying about that, and it's based on what the media is being told by the United Nations World Meteorological Organization, right? Then you have to assume that the United Nations WMO is lying. And if that's the case, why? What's the agenda? To what end?
A transfer of wealth. It's
transfer of wealth,
obvious.
okay.
But here's what I'm looking at. Why is it, if this is such big news, it's like, oh, the world is heating up, the oceans are going to rise. How come CNN just last year moved their headquarters in Manhattan right to waterfront property? Why did the Obamas buy waterfront property in Martha's Vineyard? Why are people buying all this waterfront property? Because, in a couple years, it's all going to be flooded, right? Does that make sense?
Doesn't make sense at all, Dave. You're probably onto something there, buddy. Yeah, I don't know. I can't speak to that. But Bloomberg News, this is this morning's headline. The year 2021 now expected to qualify among the hottest 7 in history, all of them recorded since 2014. So in other words, the 7 hottest years have been the last 7 years. According to an early estimate by the United Nations World Meteorological Organization released Sunday, the widely anticipated annual estimate of the year's temperature ranking and the report on climate trends comes as diplomats converge on Glasgow, Scotland for 2 weeks of UN talks. Countries will confer on how to keep warming below 2 degrees Celsius compared with pre-industrial levels, but preferably 1.5 degrees Celsius. The world has warmed 1.1 degrees Celsius since industrialization in the 19th century. The atmospheric concentration of carbon dioxide, the biggest driver of this heating, has reached beyond 413 parts per million. That is the highest on modern records, and also in the geological evidence from the last 125,000 years. Methane, nitrous oxide, both more potent and less prevalent than CO2, also reach record levels, end quote. So that, that doesn't sound good, does it? And that's why the Trudeau government, I suppose, is making another big show of it in Scotland. It's a priority for your government. Your government is making this a priority, but do you think the government should be making this a priority, or do you think the government should have other priorities? You think it's easy to make priorities? And if you think the government should have other priorities aside from fighting climate change, what should those priorities be? This is the Rob Snow Show on City News.
It was devastating, and it's devastating to all small business, but not knowing where it was going to go. But then the renovation market, as people stayed home, took off like wildfire. And for us, yes, we're very lucky, very fortunate that we were able to turn things around. I think a lot of it had to do with our internet presence as well, that I was, kept working on over years, and then it kind of took off. So that was very positive. But now, no, people are staying at home. We're renovating different markets, whether it's a kitchen or a backyard or your fireplace. They want to cozy things up. So yes, things are extremely busy right now. Right now it's fireplaces, and I think with the snowbirds, a lot of those clients have existing wood fireplaces, so they're looking at inserts. So they want to convert the wood to gas. They don't want to deal with the wood part of it, but they want it clean and easy and efficient, and that's been a major, major increase in our business. The cottage and chalet market has really increased, absolutely. We see that people, that's their staycation now, is either the backyard or their cottage with their close bubble of family. So there's no question that we've seen a big, big increase in that area as well. I've seen a change in the backyard because now the staycation, from my past being in the pool business, one of our great clients was in the other day, and he's in the pool business. He's booking for 2022 for in-ground pools, okay? So I think what's happened now is that's brought everybody back home, and I think maybe down the road, maybe 3, 4, 5 years from now, we're still going to see people spending time in their backyards and staying home more. The barbecue area, really, we call it the backyard. So you walk out of your house into a backyard, and it kind of looks like that with the fencing and the sky and things like that. So that is just our fun room. It's just, there's a lot of cool gadgets there that has to do with dealing with charcoal and wood pellet barbecues. To go online, you're going to find, you just Google, romantic fireplaces will come up. The one nice thing about our work is that when the Google reviews and the Google pictures are phenomenal. We're uploading stuff every day. I have at least 1,000 jobs, real jobs that you can take a look at, either on the Google pictures on the drive, or if you go to our website at romanticfireplaces.com and click on our work, it's where we used to load lots of them up, but there's lots of pictures there too. But the great thing about that is they're real. There's testimonials there about people talking about our team. And our team here is unique to everybody else. It's two small teams, but these fellas work for me. They're our guys. So when they go into your home, they care as much about your house as you do.
It's time to talk back
on the Rob Snow Show.
Have your say and call now.
613-750-1310.
Climate change. Be a big story all week. Climate change, COP26. Underway for 2 weeks, 400 private jets, 4,000 journalists on hand to cover COP26. And what is it, about 21,000 delegates and 13,000 observers, just observers. I don't know what you do. I guess you just go and kind of like, look, just observing. Pay no attention to me. I am just here to observe. Okay.
They're auditing. They might take that class next year. I don't know.
Tommy in Carlton Place. Tommy.
Hello.
Hi, Tommy.
Hi, Rob. Long-time listener, first-time caller.
Well, I appreciate you calling. Why have you called today?
I appreciate your show.
What took you so long, Tommy?
Easier for me to listen than call, but you brought up some good points, Rob, and I want to. I think I have more questions than anything. You just brought up 413 parts per million, the highest ever recorded.
Ever recorded, yeah.
125,000 years.
That's the
correct?
Geologic evidence, they say, from the past 125,000 years. Yeah.
The I've got China.
Okay.
China seems like they record weather a lot longer than we do.
Okay.
Cycles.
Okay. Right.
thousands of years. It seems North America, we can't get out of the 1800s.
Right. Okay.
So when we're looking at things, it seems like China understands cycles a little better because they look at weather patterns for many years. And when I listen to people in China, when I just YouTube weather specialists in China, and I'm hearing grand solar minimum and Miranda minimum. They're the same thing. And it's when the sun's peak goes down just in years. It happens, and it's going to come into fruition again. So a lot of the things they're equating, and Russia's saying this as well. I've heard it through Putin's mouth. Again, it's the grand solar minimum and Miranda minimum. And it doesn't seem like their citizens feel as bad. They don't feel as responsible. That's one thing.
Okay.
And the other thing is we have a war now. You said that Prince Charles was doing a war on climate. We did a war on drugs.
Prince Charles says we need to be on a war footing. We need to,
we had a war on drugs.
Yes.
I just heard on hold that there was a commercial for 30 years or 40 years after the Reagans did a war on drugs. There was something for helping people in Ottawa for addiction, youngsters. I've helped with the Dave Smith. It doesn't seem like it was ever won, or the war on poverty, or the war on homeless.
Right. Yeah, war on terrorism. Yeah.
Whatever you want. It never seems to be won.
Yeah.
It just seems to put a lot of shame into people's and fear, and that's what this seems to be, global fear. When I look back at, Weltpolitik in Germany, it seems like they're all it's same kind of thing. They're going after the global, changing anything you're putting global in. So those are the big things. Now, you had questions also was what should our priorities be? So I'd like to tell you as a Canadian citizen, number one should be happiness. Finland does a great job on that.
Okay.
Mental, physical, spiritual. And I think we have to protect our borders. So I think our Coast Guard should protect and serve. They should be armed. We should be up in our Arctic. We should have a lot better protection.
Okay.
And then on our economy, we understand fiat currencies have always faltered. A fiat currency has never ever stuck around forever, and ours is faltering.
Okay.
So that the biggest concern I think.
Stop debasing the currency. Don't debase the currency.
Oh, I'm not debasing the currency, but cryptocurrency. We're talking about currencies that we don't even know about.
Yeah,
I ask my veterans, or I ask my seniors around here. I'm a younger person. I seem to have a little bit of an understanding, but there's new things that people understand.
Sure.
They're afraid that they're going to outlive their money, and then their money is going to be. I'm asking our seniors, what are you concerned about? Because I'm concerned about our kids and our seniors.
Yep. Okay.
We need to take care of our kids and our seniors.
Take care of kids, seniors,
and we didn't
and the
do
country.
that with our seniors through this pandemic.
Gotcha, Tommy. I got to run, Tommy. Thank you for calling. Good call for the first call. Joanne, Orleans. Joanne.
Hi.
First time caller?
No.
Okay.
An old soul.
No,
yeah, even though you didn't list me in your call.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I was so hurt.
Oh, that's okay.
I had to call before Michelle.
So you've called to give me a heck then, I guess. Okay. All right.
I just want to, I had to chime in.
Yeah.
I really think the hypocrisy of those attending this meeting, as you pointed out so brilliantly, the hypocrisy is going to be their downfall. If there's one contribution Catherine McKenna has done, a single contribution in her political life, it was to state out loud that if you repeat something often enough, people will believe it. And that's why you've got your 4,000 journalists over there. Your previous caller before the break, amen to you, brother. I'm with you. I don't mind being called a climate denier. They meant for it to be insulting, and I'm just going to own it. I'm not insulted by it.
Oh, I see. Okay. All right. You're taking ownership of that, are you?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Climate Change Nexus for your listeners.
Sure.
Climate Change Nexus, a project that John Robson is involved with. I turn to it. It challenges the research that's being published and the headlines that are published, and it just, the lack of trust that people have for mainstream media, part of it, you can blame climate change for that. Their reporting of it. It doesn't hold up with people's behavior. Why are people going to this great trouble to perpetrate a lie? I also believe it's a transfer of wealth. The fundamental change that they want to take place, it is not just a superficial change, it is the big reset, and it's a fundamental change in how we do things.
All right. Okay.
We should be focused. Will you ask for priorities?
Priorities.
Resource development in Canada, which is going to be stifled. But we have rare earth. We have many, many minerals and resources, wood. It's not just about oil and gas, as you said last week.
Yeah.
And all of that gets to stay in the ground because people are afraid of climate change.
Oh, the mining sector is bigger than the auto sector. The mining sector is bigger than aerospace.
And the way we do it is so fundamentally different than other nations. There is look at those miners that were trapped in northern Ontario, and how every mechanism in place saved their lives. They had shafts, they had exits, they had communication with above ground. It wasn't like we saw in other countries where you have mining disasters. Mining here and developing our resources here is done in a brilliant way. We should be at the forefront of that.
Okay.
Our healthcare spending, that should be a priority.
Sure.
Manufacturing, the supply chain thing. Why aren't we talking about this? Why is the government not talking about this? I think
because most of them are in Glasgow right now. All right, Joanne, I got to run. They're not talking about resilient supply chains in Glasgow right now. Kate, Ottawa. Kate.
Hi, good morning.
Hi, Kate.
If our leadership really, truly cared about climate change, they would be doing this virtually. But let's get this straight. It is a big party for Justin Trudeau and his crowd. As you might have seen the pictures.
I did see those pictures from Holland, right?
And we've been only studying climate change in North America for 137 years. The numbers previous to that are just an extrapolation. So the uncertainty in the numbers goes up significantly, and you can research that. Climate change has been happening for billions of years. And it's going to
but it's not. To me, it's not about what the science says here and what the science says there. It's about what the priority should be for the government. Clearly, very clearly, this is a file of major importance for the government. But I just think with all of these other big issues to deal with, pandemic, economy, cost of living, cost of childcare, long-term care, health care, our place in the world, we are spending, just my own opinion, an inordinate amount of time on the climate change file.
It is a major priority for this government because they see it that they can con people into more and more and more tax paying.
Okay.
In the 1960s, the government said all the oil will be gone in 10 years. In the 1970s, they said another ice age is going to happen in 10 years. In the 1980s, they said acid rain will destroy our crops in 10 years. In 1990, they said the ozone layer will be destroyed.
I don't really have time to have a 50-year history lesson, Kate, but I thank you for your time because I'm out of it on the Rob Snow Show on City News.
The Rob Snow Show.
FM in Smith Falls and the Valley. Number 1 for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Monday, November 1st. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa and in Smith Falls, it's 7 degrees. Here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. At the crucial COP26 Climate Summit, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau set to deliver Canada's national speech and outline some details of one of his climate pledges made during this election campaign. City News Parliament Hill reporter Cormac McSweeney has that story.
When the Prime Minister speaks to other world leaders at this climate summit in Scotland, he's expected to give some details about the first steps Canada will take towards capping and cutting greenhouse gas emissions from our oil and gas sector. It was one of the key environmental promises from the Liberals during the election. The Environment Minister has already said Canada will not be setting a new target for emissions reductions aside from the one that was set in the spring, which is 40 to 45% below 2005 levels. U.S. President Joe Biden also expected to speak today, and his national security advisor Jake Sullivan told reporters aboard Air Force One the stakes are high.
Glasgow, from our perspective, is a key moment setting us off on a decisive decade of climate action.
British Prime Minister Boris Johnson opened the summit saying, with climate change, it's like the world is strapped to a doomsday device. Cormac McSweeney, Parliament Hill.
City News Time 11:02, and now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
Some showers are possible today, otherwise sun and cloud. The high 10 degrees, a gusty west wind. Tonight, mainly clear down to 2, and tomorrow some showers, mainly for the afternoon and evening, but could see some flurries mixing in Tuesday night as well. The high near 9. For today, the high 10.
And right now, 7 degrees in both Ottawa and in Smith Falls. Positive rate from COVID tests done over the past day in Ontario has risen to 1.8%. There were over 19,700 tests completed, and 422 of them came back positive in Ontario. 38 of the cases are in Ottawa, 4 in the Eastern Ontario Health Unit, 1 in Renfrew, and no new cases today in Leeds, Grenville, Lanark. Now, the province also says 3 more people have died from the virus in the past day. 9 full-time staff members and 14 part-timers and casual employees have been fired from CHEO. They refused a COVID-19 vaccine. The hospital does say 99.4% of its nearly 4,000 employees, though, have been vaccinated. City News Time 11:03, a new survey on the mental health of people as it related to the strains of COVID-19 pandemic took in people including caregivers and children. City News reporter Caitlin Lee has that story.
Feelings of social isolation and a lack of in-person learning led to higher levels of depression and anxiety in the third wave. This according to the Offord Center for Child Studies at McMaster University. They surveyed over 10,000 caregivers. 38% reported moderate to high levels of anxiety in May to July of this year, compared to 30% last year. That jump even higher when it comes to symptoms of depression. Lead researcher Andrea Gonzalez says some kids are resilient and will recover quickly, but other children and parents may take time to bounce back. A third survey will check in with families in 2022. Caitlin Lee, City News.
And the OPP is reporting an 11-year-old child struck by a vehicle last night. This happened in Greater Napanee, and it was around 8:30 last night. Police say a vehicle was traveling southbound on John Street when the 11-year-old went out onto the road and was struck. The child sustained minor injuries. It was taken to hospital for treatment and sent home to recover. Police say no charges have been laid and none are anticipated. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
The world is changing.
So keep up with Rob.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Jeffrey Johnson's going to join us in a minute or two here. He's an international affairs columnist with the Kingston Whig Standard. But before we speak with Jeffrey, U.S. President Joe Biden is speaking at the COP26 climate conference in Scotland.
Emissions, one of the most potent greenhouse gases, by at least 30% by the end of the decade. More than 70 countries have already signed up to support rapid reduction of methane pollution, and I encourage every nation to sign on. It It's the simple, most effective strategy we have to slow global warming in the near term. My friends, if we're to recognize that a better, more hopeful future of every nation has to do its part, with ambitious targets to keep 1.5 degrees in reach, and specific plans of how to get there, especially the major economies. It's imperative that we support developing nations so they can be our partners in this effort. Right now, we're still falling short. There's no more time to hang back or sit on the fence or argue amongst ourselves. This is the challenge of our collective lifetimes, the existential threat to human existence as we know it. And every day we delay, the cost of inaction increases. So let this be the moment that we answer history's call here in Glasgow. Let this be the start of a decade of transformative action that preserves our planet and raises the quality of life for people everywhere. We can do this. We just have to make a choice to do it. So let's get to work, and thank you. Those of us who are responsible for much of the deforestation and all the problems we have so far have an overwhelming obligation to the nations who, in fact, were not there, have not done it. And we have to help much more than we have thus far. God bless you all, and may God save the planet. Thank you.
All right, so that's the President of the United States, Joe Biden. Earlier, opening the summit, it was the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Boris Johnson. Roll tape, David, on that.
I was there with many of you in Copenhagen 11 years ago when we acknowledged we had a problem. I was there in Paris 6 years ago when we agreed to net zero and to try to restrain the rise in the temperature of the planet to 1.5 degrees. And all those promises will be nothing but blah, 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 to coin a phrase. And the anger and the impatience of the world will be uncontainable unless we make this COP26 in Glasgow the moment when we get real about climate change.
Okay, so Boris Johnson, UK Prime Minister. This is really his signature event. And with that introduction, we welcome Jeffrey Johnson from the Kingston Whig Standard, with us every Monday morning, international affairs columnist. And when it comes to international affairs, Jeffrey, they don't come much bigger than this. 21,000 delegates, for crying out loud. What's at stake?
Good morning, Rob. It's, Prime Minister Johnson pretty much summed it up there. Yeah, lots at stake. This is basically our last chance to really get climate change under control. Scientists are telling us that we have a decade or less to reach our goals and make sure that we're on track to keep the surface temperature of the world to 1.5 degrees Celsius increase. Anything more than that, and we're headed for disaster. Unfortunately, the latest reports that have come out have said that given the current pace of greenhouse gas emissions, we're on track to increasing the surface temperature of the world by 2.7 degrees Celsius, which would bring ecological disaster, because we've seen, this past year, we've seen a lot of extreme weather, storms, wildfires, and other problems that have real impacts. In fact, my latest column for the Kingston Whig Standard is about the impact of climate change on migration. And every year, at least 21.5 million people are displaced by climate change. That's double the number of people who are displaced by conflict. In the coming decades, according to the Biden White House, 143 million people will be displaced by climate change. So we've really got to get it under control. Now, COP26, a little bit of housekeeping. That means a conference of the parties to the UN Climate Convention, and this is the 26th such event. So basically what's at stake here is countries have got to come up with national emissions targets that will meet the goals of the Paris Climate Agreement. And so under that deal, which the world signed on to in 2015, every 5 years countries have to come up with new national greenhouse gas emissions targets. So earlier this year, Canada increased its commitment. So originally under Paris, we were going to slash our greenhouse gas emissions by 30% below 2005 levels. Earlier this year, under this process where we update our commitments, we're now going to do 40 to 45% below 2005 levels by 2030.
By 2030,
so that's pretty significant.
Yeah, sure. That's what they say they're going to do.
Yeah.
They've been in office for 6 years and have never reduced greenhouse gases at all. Not even by a single ton. Yet somehow, Jeffrey, they're going to cut greenhouse gas emissions by 45% in 8 years?
Yeah. So
how?
Yeah, exactly. So very few
at what cost? And at what cost? Right.
At what cost? So very few countries in the world have actually met their goals, and I think Gambia is one of the few that's actually exceeded its goals. Yeah. So there's a lot on Canada's plate. Now, to be fair, Canada has done some things. Canada made a pledge. So under Paris, the rich countries of the world agreed to help finance climate change adaptation and mitigation for developing countries. And the developed world is supposed to provide $100 billion per year through 2025 to help developing countries. Canada has recently doubled its contribution for climate finance. We're going from $2.6 billion to $5.3 billion over the next 5 years. And also the UK appointed Germany and Canada to head up the international effort to make sure that we actually move towards that $100 billion a year, because the developing world doesn't have the money. And actually, Joe Biden just referenced that $100 billion. But you're quite right. Canada has got to do more. So I would say that we expect carbon taxes to increase.
Well, they've promised to do that in a big way.
Yeah, you're going. We're also.
They're going to go up more than 4 times from where they are right now. So.
Yeah.
What are you paying for gas in Brockville?
Yeah, I'm not sure what it is today. The last time I filled up, it was $144. And, I'm glad I drive a small car.
Yeah, screaming deal.
What we're going to have to see, though, is because I watched Joe Biden's press conference yesterday at the G20, and he was asked about his pressure to get gas prices down, because, and he basically said that in the short run, we're still going to be needing oil and gas, right? Because we haven't electrified all our cars, and we're going to have to, greatly expand our clean energy grid. Canada's going to have to do this too. So we're going to still be using oil and gas, but the plan is to gradually ramp up the carbon taxes and the rebate system, and meanwhile, develop this clean energy transportation system, because transportation is a big part of greenhouse gases. And so this is going to require all kinds of investments in clean growth energy. Now, Canada has invested $100 billion in clean growth in recent years. So that is something, but it's going to have to be at a much accelerated rate. And it's a steep hill to climb, but we need to climb it, because I've got to say that people need to take climate change seriously. I know a lot of people don't, but it's here, it's now. We're seeing.
But I think people worry about their own economic security, and I think that's the crossroads that we're at right now. Like, we're seeing 400 jets fly into Glasgow, while working class people in European cities are wondering if they're going to be able to heat their homes this winter, or whether Putin is going to shut off natural gas. Here in Ottawa, people are worried about the strongest inflation reading in 20 years. They're worried about the cost of groceries. They're worried about the cost of heating their own homes. In rural Canada, propane prices are up 300%. Let alone what it is for a tank of gas. So, when it comes to some global agreement on international emissions for greenhouse gases, it needs to be distilled for people. What is this going to mean for me?
And
my quality of life, right?
Yeah, I totally get it. And the fact is that we've left this way too long. And now we have all these other crises. We've got the pandemic, as you say. We've got the supply bottlenecks, which is causing inflation around the world. We also have people, who have had a pretty hard economic time during the pandemic. But with all that said, we've got to see the bigger picture. Climate change isn't just some global thing that really doesn't affect us. Climate change is something that is happening here, and it's happening now. Now, we're lucky in this part of Canada. We're going to, I think, be spared some of the worst parts of it. But we're going to see in the coming years, agriculture is going to be greatly affected by climate change. We're going to have more extreme weather. We're going to have these really hot temperatures. We just saw this past summer out in the West, Lytton, BC, those record temperatures. We had all those folks dying from extreme heat. We're going to be seeing more and more of this, and it's going to affect the economy. It's going to affect agriculture. It's going to affect forestry. We're going to see, on a human scale, we're going to see more migration. I've been writing about this, how it is climate migration is going to be destabilizing the world, destabilizing countries. You're going to have countries like Russia using the climate crisis to destabilize Europe, because Russia actually wants to see large numbers of migrants, going from Africa to the European Union, and that will create xenophobia and destabilize it. So it is. I totally get why people are concerned about their pocketbook and inflation, but in the future, if we don't get climate change under control, we're going to see food prices skyrocket. We're going to see resource wars over water and farmland, and life for our children and our grandchildren will be very bleak.
Well, on that cheery note. All right.
Well, I wanted to bring it into sharp focus.
Yes, no, you did.
People need to understand, because it's my job to look at the big picture, and people need to understand that this is really bad. As bad as the pandemic has been for us, what we're facing with climate change in the pretty near future, Rob, is pretty grim.
Okay. Good to hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Take care.
All right. I'm off to get an antidepressant. That's Jeffrey Johnston, Kingston Whig Standard International Affairs columnist. It's 11:18. We'll be right back with David Sally from the Ottawa Business Journal to tell you about the Bobs, the Best of Ottawa Business Awards. That's coming right up. Rob Snow Show on City News.
So Rideau Rockcliffe Community Resource Centre has been around since 1982, and it's here to serve residents of Ward 13. So our focus is on helping to reduce poverty in this community, as well as empowering residents to find resilience within themselves. So one of the new focuses of our centre is around food programming. So you'll notice today when we go around on a little tour that we have a number of food programs here at the centre. So one being obviously our emergency food program, which is really great. So residents can come and access food when they are in need. We also have a number of food-based social enterprises here at Rideau Rockcliffe as well. So one being the Ottawa Good Food Box, another being Market Mobile. One of our new initiatives that started this year as response to COVID is called Good Food on the Move, and it's a click and collect online store, and we have 7 pickup locations throughout the city. More sort of local here for Ward 13 residents, we've also started a free produce market as well. So community members can come on Wednesdays and Fridays and be able to access additional free fruits and vegetables.
Social Harvest Ottawa is one of the social enterprises here at the Rideau Rockcliffe Community Resource Centre. We operate this great urban greenhouse, and our work is not only to grow nutritious and delicious food, but also to nourish communities with community members here in Ward 13 and beyond. The greenhouse is a year-round project. We're a team of 4 employees working here. We have 2 full-time employees and 2 part-time employees. We focus on growing microgreens from late fall to early spring, and hothouse crops in the summertime, such as tomatoes and cucumbers.
The Mission Food Truck we're in our 5th week of collaborating with them to come visit our center, and we just got in on it at the right time. They were looking for new communities to branch out to. They said absolutely. Right now they're funded through donations. They travel around Ottawa and just give out delicious, fresh, hot food to people as well. We have at our center the Ottawa Good Food Box as well as the Markmobile. So Ottawa Good Food Box has been around for 25 years and Markmobile is a little younger, started in 2014. So they're both have the mission and the mandate of making fresh food more accessible and affordable in neighborhoods that lack access to a grocery store. So I think the greatest need that we've seen as a result of the pandemic in our community is people that we maybe have never needed to access our services before, right? So a lot of people have had, layoffs. Maybe they're just not able to work because they have to stay home with their children, over the summer, that sort of thing. So we've definitely seen the need go out, particularly for our food programming, as well as some of our counseling services as well. So it's a heavy time for people emotionally.
Fair.
Fun.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News 101.1 FM
and 1310 AM.
David Sally is back with us every week from the newsroom of the Ottawa Business Journal. Good morning.
Good morning, Rob.
It's great to hear from you. So the Bobs are coming up. Now, the Bobs are the Best Ottawa Business Awards. And if I remember, we were talking about the Bobs last year and how it was kind of an all-virtual affair, as I recall, David, right?
Right. That's
so,
right. Last year was televised,
Yep. So this time around, it's coming up November 19th. Rogers is proud to be a part of it, along with the Ottawa Business Journal, and there will be a socially distanced gala at the Westin. So tell us a little bit about the Bobs and the history of the Bobs.
Yeah, well, Rob, the Bobs, as you say, they honor the best in Ottawa business. They basically, we spotlight, some of not only the established companies that are doing big things, but also up and coming startups and entrepreneurs as well that you may not have heard of yet, but are poised to make a big impact on the local scene. So, I mean, we of course have a big lineup of headliners, if you will. Our CEO of the year, who has already been announced, of course, that's Catherine Tremblay of Excel HR and Altus Recruitment. And we just unveiled last week our Lifetime Achievement Award winner, and that is Jim Taggart. He is the longtime chairman of the Taggart Group of Companies. Everybody knows the well-known builder in town, and Jim is now 79, and he's a pretty private person. So this is this is quite an honor. He's the 11th recipient of the award, an award that's gone to a who's who really of business and community luminaries: Jim Durrell, Roger Greenberg, Shirley West-Diamond, Michael Potter of Cognos fame.
Right.
And last year, Rob Ash of Cognos. So, So he's the latest in the list. His father founded the Taggart Group of Companies back in the 40s. And Jim has led the company for decades. He's now 79. And what a great, I don't think you could have picked anybody who would have been more worthy of this, and really everybody is really praising his choice as the Lifetime Achievement Award winner. We've got the CFO of the year that will be being announced shortly. Our newsmaker of the year will also be coming down the pipeline soon.
Okay.
For those. And we've got all in all, about 24 businesses generally get honored. We do deals of the year in categories like real estate, finance, tech, tourism. So those are all honored, as well as the next big thing, companies, the real up and comers. And things like foreign investment sort of deals of the year and that sort of thing. So there's all kinds of categories here, Rob, that get spotlighted at the Bobs.
Yep. So again, it's November 19th. And you can go to the Ottawa Business Journal. They have all kinds of information there. And the MCs, again, will be Mark Sutcliffe, my former colleague here at City News, and, of course, longtime association with the Ottawa Business Journal, and Sandra Blagakis, also from here at KISS FM. So we'll be highlighting some of the Bobs-related stories during our discussions, I think, over the next few weeks, because it'll be great to have an opportunity for the business community to celebrate some of the achievements after such a challenging period. Now, we're just a little tight on time, but I remember when you were here last week, one of the stories that we talked about was Hexo, which is the big Ottawa-based cannabis company, right? Founded back in 2013. And it went on like this acquisition spree, using its shares to acquire all kinds of other companies, Xanabis, 48 North, a string of acquisitions. The shares, as a result, have been, I think the term you used last week, diluted, to say the least, right? There's a lot of shares outstanding. And even just in the last week, this company's market capitalization has fallen by 150 million US dollars. So, and I noticed that it's down again today. It's trading this morning for $1.43 US. But 6 months ago, even 6 months ago, this was a $6 stock. So it's been quite a decline. And there were headlines this weekend that warned it might not be able to make some of its debt payments. So, boy, tough times for Hexo.
Absolutely, Rob. That was one of their auditor, PricewaterhouseCoopers, there was a 6-page report attached to their financial filings just on Friday.
Wow.
Basically saying exactly that they do have concerns about Hexo's viability to basically be a sustainable enterprise.
Big time cash flow problems, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
So substantial doubt is the way they described it as its long-term viability. So, certainly it's not maybe the ideal situation for Scott Cooper, the new CEO who replaced co-founder Sebastian St. Louis a few weeks ago. He definitely has his work cut out for him, and he's only been on the job about 10 days, but he's going to have to he's going to have to try and get the ship to right the ship, so to speak, in a hurry here, Rob. It sounds like.
All right.
Yeah,
that's one to follow for sure. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, David. We'll talk next week.
All right, thanks, Rob.
Bye-bye. Yep. Dave Sally from the Ottawa Business Journal. We're back right after the news with more coverage of COP26 on City News.
local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
This is Monday, the 1st of November. Good morning, I'm Jason White. Right now in Ottawa, mainly sunny, 8 degrees. It's 9 in Smiths Falls. Here's what's making news this hour. 7 people recovering from injuries after the balcony they were on collapsed last night in Ottawa's Centertown neighborhood. Emergency crews called to Frank Street just off Elgin around 10 o'clock. 4 of the injured had to be taken to hospital in stable condition, while the other 3 were treated and released at the scene. 9 full-time staff members and 14 part-time casual employees have been fired from CHEO after refusing a COVID-19 vaccine. The Children's Hospital says 99.4% of its nearly 4,000 employees are vaccinated. Flu shots are now available at your local pharmacy and doctor's office. Beginning today, the province says anyone who wants a shot can get one. Last year was a pretty mild flu season, but the province has increased the number of shots available this year. They've named this year's Silver Cross Mother, who will lay a wreath next Thursday during the National Remembrance Ceremony at the War Memorial in downtown Ottawa. José Simardi is from Quebec. Her daughter, Karine Blais, was killed when an IED exploded under the truck she was driving in Afghanistan in 2009. City News Time, 11:32. I'm Jason White. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
He's a pillar of community opinion.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM
and 1310 AM.
So still ahead, Money Mondays with Peter Fraser. He is a certified financial planner for this every Monday. That's why we call it Money Mondays. Certified financial planner, Cardinal Planning, Manulife Securities, and going green. You know, the government wants you to go green, wants you to live the green, sustainable lifestyle, and it incentivizes you by way of the tax code. So we'll talk about some of the tax credits that are out there. He's with Cardinal Planning, Manulife Securities. That's coming right up, along with Dale Buchan, who is Vice President of Research and Analysis with the Canadian Institute for Climate Choices. Prime Minister Trudeau is speaking right now at the COP26 climate conference in Scotland.
By 2050. That's no small task for a major oil and gas producing country. It's a big step that's absolutely necessary. To do our part globally, we've doubled our climate financing, including up to $1 billion for the transition away from coal. And to help deal with the consequences of climate change, Canada's making our first contribution to the Adaptation Fund. On doit trouver les solutions qui conviennent à nos citoyens dans leur vie quotidienne. C'est pourquoi le Canada s'est fixé comme objectif de vendre uniquement des voitures zéro émission et d'établir un réseau de distribution d'électricité à émissions net zéro d'ici 2035. Comme l'a dit récemment Alok Sharma, Paris a promis, Glasgow doit livrer. La menace que représentent les changements climatiques n'a pas de frontières. C'est pourquoi il faut faire front commun pour arriver à des résultats concrets. Comme on collabore tous pour en finir avec la pandémie de COVID-19, nous devons appliquer cette même urgence d'agir contre la crise climatique et la perte de biodiversité. Over the next 2 weeks, we must demonstrate how we'll deliver on the promise of Paris with transparency and accountability. To the world's most vulnerable who need us to act, to Indigenous people who can show us the way, to young people marching in our streets in cities around the world, we hear you. It's true. Your leaders need to do better. That's why we're here today. What happened in Lytton can and has and will happen anywhere. How many more signs do we need? This is our time to step up and step up together. Merci.
So So that was the Prime Minister speaking from COP26 in Glasgow, Scotland. So good timing, because we have with us Dale Bugen, Vice President, Research Analysis with the Canadian Institute for Climate Choices. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Nice to hear from you. You're on your way to Glasgow today, as I understand.
I'm headed off tomorrow.
Okay.
Soon
Well,
to go.
happy trails. What did you think of what the Prime Minister just said?
I think he's about right. This is an opportunity for the world to signal to each other that they are all taking this challenge of climate change seriously, that they are all kind of leveling up, and that they are committing to more ambitious targets, but even more than that they're following through on those targets with real credible policy to deliver on them. Climate change is this global collective action problem where it only works if the world acts in concert. And that's really what these conferences are all about. They're all about trying to ratchet up our collective action to deliver on benefits for everybody.
Okay. So 2 weeks from now, you look back at this COP26 conference, what would success look like?
Well, a few things, I think. I think we want to see some more commitments about policy. We want to see more action on incentives, on regulations, on carbon pricing, not just in Canada, but everywhere, to kind of continue that effort to deliver on more emissions reductions, to avoid more of those costs of climate change over time. More concretely, I think there's some nuanced things here as well. I think this emerging and increasingly clear role for private capital and private investment markets and private investors are going to be part of this process as well. And I think we want to see progress on how capital markets are aligning their private investments with net zero as well. We've heard about Mark Carney moving towards this and mobilizing the banks and the investment community. That's going to be essential.
Well, ESG seems to be all the rage right now, right? When you listen to the financial news media, and when you listen to a lot of the CEOs of very big organizations, including oil and gas and other fossil fuel companies, ESG seems to be a big thing for them right now.
Yeah, absolutely it is. And that's because it's in their own interest for it to be a big thing right now. If markets are moving, let's put it this way, 70% of the global economy and 70% of global oil demand is now coming from countries that have committed to net zero by mid-century. That is a seismic shock to global markets. Right. So investors need to be thinking about these sort of things to protect their long-term returns. This is not just environment for them anymore. This is about future sources of growth and future sources of prosperity.
Okay. So the goal has been since Paris to keep global warming to below 2 degrees Celsius, 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit compared with pre-industrial levels, but the preferred target would be to keep it below 1.5 degrees Celsius, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Right. Okay. How is the planet doing at that?
Well, let's call this good news and bad news. I think the good news is that we are starting to bend the curve. 10 years ago, we were on track for 4 or 5 degrees of warming, and now it's more like we're on track for 2.5 to 3 degrees of warming. That's still bad. There's still big economic and social implications of that kind of warming, but it also shows that we have made progress. The other half of that story is that there's still more to do. Mm-hmm. That even getting from 2.5 to 1.5 degrees, even getting from 2.5 to 2 degrees is really big, significant reductions in suffering, reductions in economic costs, reduction in lost lives. So every little bit contributes real benefits to Canada and to Canadians, but also to the rest of the world. So I guess that kind of leaves us at progress, but not quite enough progress yet. We need to keep that ambition moving and keep it going to avoid those costly impacts of climate change.
All right. Here in this country, it's sort of a tradition for any Canadian government to make a climate change target, take like the reduction of greenhouse gases, and then miss it. And this government, government that we have here, the Liberals under Justin Trudeau, they're no better than any government that has come before it. They've been there 6 years. They've never reduced greenhouse gases. Yet, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, finish your sentence. Sorry, Rob, go ahead.
I was going to say, but now their target is by 2030, a reduction in greenhouse gases of between 40 and 45%. How are they ever going to achieve that? That's only about 8 years from now. If they've never been able to reduce greenhouse gases before, how are they going to how's the country collectively going to cut greenhouse gases in half in 8 years?
Yeah, well, first thing is that you're not wrong. This is an unfortunate Canadian tradition of having a big gap between ambition of our language and the action of our actual policy instruments. I would argue this time is a bit different, though.
Okay.
I mean, just last week, an independent organization called Clean Prosperity reduced independent modeling that modeled all the policies that are in the federal government's plans and the existing provincial government's plans, and it said there's a decent shot of hitting that 2030 target, and that's because we've got a carbon price rising to $170 per ton, levels that would have been impossible 5 years ago. We've got a clean fuel standard that is creating incentives to use cleaner fuels. There's talk about a vehicle emission standard that will require auto manufacturers to be selling a certain number of electric vehicles and increasing that share year over year. All of those things are not just rhetoric. They are actual policy levers that change the behavior of people like you and me, but also firms and investors as well. At the same time, the cost of clean technologies like electric vehicles, like renewable electricity, are declining rapidly as the rest of the world starts to mobilize. As those capital markets and the investors we talked about start to shovel their capital towards low carbon options, that can accelerate the progress too. So I do think that there's more to do. We need to continue to monitor and track our progress, not just to 2030, but all the way to net zero by 2050. But we're seeing way more policy action at all orders of government now than we ever have before in Canada.
Okay. How would you compare Canada's ambition when it comes to setting these targets with our counterparts? For example, as I understand it, the Biden administration's climate change targets, talking about GHG reductions, are more aggressive than Canada's. And the European Union's targets are much more aggressive than both Canada and the United States. What would you say?
Yeah, I think there's a few things there. I think first, you're right about the comparisons. The second point is that, again, let's be careful to differentiate ambition and targets from policy levers to deliver on them.
Okay.
Right now, the Americans are struggling to pass legislation that can enable them to deliver on those emissions reductions. So until we see some policy levers, then I think that we should hold off that comparison. The other thing that matters here is starting points and progress, where we're at and where we have to go. And every region has their own challenges and their own opportunities. Canada's got a big advantage of lots of clean electricity across the country, although not symmetrically distributed across the country.
Right.
The U.S. has some big coal-fired electricity that is fundamental to achieving its emissions reductions. Phasing out that coal is relatively low cost compared to other options. So there's some low-hanging fruit for the U.S. potentially there. But it's also got its own challenges in terms of a huge transportation sector with lots of emissions, as do we. We also have our oil and gas sector that has fairly expensive emissions reductions that are hard to reduce. Doesn't mean we can't tackle that sector. We have to tackle that sector, but it's a more challenging one in some ways.
Okay. So you're going to COP26. Does that make you an observer? Are you an observer?
Yeah, I'm a member of the Canadian delegation.
Oh, okay.
But I'm not part of the negotiating team. I'm there as the many experts and different voices that they have invited along to provide support. So that is sharing our knowledge and participating in the conversations that are happening at and around the COP.
Very cool. Enjoy it.
Thanks so much.
Thank you very much for your insight. I hope we can call upon you again sometime.
Anytime. Happy to chat.
Yep. Okay. That is Dale Bugin. He is going to COP26 tomorrow. And as well, he is with an organization called Canadian Institute for Climate Choices. This is the Rob Snow Show on City News.
My name is Pamela Caillou. I'm a local artist. I'm Métis, and the heritage derives from Algonquin and Huron background. That comes from way, way back from the 1600s. I was trained in school classically, like we studied the masters like Picasso, Michelangelo, Van Gogh, and so you'd have to say it's quite different, my style. What I've done is taken the skills that were taught to me by traditional painting and incorporated that with the Indigenous heritage. My art pieces incorporate the energy and spirit of the Mother Earth in pretty much every single one of them, because I want people to realize, even though we might think we are the masters of the domain here on the planet, that is not the case. It's the Mother Earth that's providing a balance and our causes to live and whatnot. And it's just always see her and remember her and respect her. Well, I try to keep my style different because there are like a handful of Canadian artists that are really well known, like Norval Morrisseau and whatnot, but it's been done. So I kind of want to stay away from the pack, and that's what makes my artwork a little more unique. But at the same time, if you're looking at it, you do know it's Indigenous, and you do know it's the woodland style. I usually start by coming up with an idea, which would be, let's say, 4 days. Well, it depends what's inspiring me at the time. It could be a lot of trees, it could be water, it could be the medicine wheel. I would choose a subject and try to really incorporate what it is I want people to see from that. So then from there, I would have sketchbooks, and I do little sketches of everything because the canvas is expensive. So you don't want to start something and have to throw it away. And then from there, I go on to the bigger piece on the canvas. Once I have on my sketches the direction I want to take my artwork in. I chose a lot of vibrant colors for the pieces because if somebody is willing to make the commitment to have my piece of work in their home, I would actually like them to come home after a long, hard day, and some days aren't so great, to look at something that's very joyful.
CUBEIT. He's the opinionated Ottawa icon.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
So this is perfect timing. Peter Fraser is here. It's Money Monday. And we're going to talk about all the ways that government incentivizes you to go green. Good morning, Peter. Good to hear from you, Peter.
Hi, Rob. How are you?
Well, I'm good. You know, climate change has been a very big topic of discussion this morning, and the Prime Minister is in Glasgow for the big climate change conference. And let's face it, politically, it's hard to get elected unless you have some kind of program to fight climate change, and usually those programs include something to do with tax credits. So,
right,
that's kind of where we're coming at it today. Let's consider this the sustainable version of Money Monday. Okay, so what are some of the financial incentives available to taxpayers that encourage people to save energy, live greener lives, Peter?
Well, there are a few at the federal level and in Ontario. I'm reminded that the people who complain about taxes can be divided into two groups, roughly, women and men. So,
okay.
But tax planning of all types is really a big cash flow item as well in most people's budgets. And so it's important that in this case we can take a specific look at the green items that are available as tax incentives for us.
Okay.
Federally, there is the Greener Homes Grant of up to $5,600 for eligible retrofits. I would say off the top, Rob, the pickings are pretty slim at both levels. I was surprised when we did this deep dive for this segment that at an individual level, there's about $5,600 available for retrofits of your home.
That's it.
That's
at the federal level, really. That's it.
Yeah. That's the most applicable and the most available. And the second one at an individual level is the Transport Canada ZEV rebate, like the zero emissions vehicle. It's $5,000 for electrics and hybrids, and it's on new purchases only. So, $5,600 to put in windows or a little bit of renovation credit, and $5,000 only for an electric or hybrid vehicle purchase.
Wow.
There are two others at the federal level, which we're somewhat familiar with. Energy Savings Rebate Program is to businesses only that promote energy efficient equipment. So many of us have bought a dishwasher or a dryer with the Energy Star certified sticker on it. But what's worth underscoring is that there are no deductions presently for the expenses that we make personally, like new lighting or energy efficient appliances. There's nothing that is credited to us as individual consumers.
Right, so if I have in my home, for example, soon to be replaced is an old washer dryer combo. So right. I don't get any kind of tax incentive if I ditch those. In other words, right?
No deduction for expenses personally. Yeah.
Isn't that interesting? Okay.
And the last one is a big one, but it goes to a cohort we call MUSH, municipalities, schools, and hospitals, and that's 25% of eligible project costs on energy efficient upgrades in that space. So two that we could see as individual consumers that would move the needle on our behavior choices, and two that we can't. So that's the feds.
That's the feds. But I'm really surprised by this because of all the talk that was offered up, first of all, over the years and during the election campaign, that the Greener Homes Grant, I mean, there were all kinds of numbers that were floating around. I mean, tens of thousands of dollars, like maybe $40,000 or whatever. And you would have to get like an audit done of your home and to see what was available. I'm surprised it's only $5,600. I shouldn't say only $5,600, but it's better than nothing. But
well, $600 of the $56 is the audit reimbursement.
Is the audit okay?
Right.
Yeah.
So,
and depending on what you're in the market for an electric car, I mean, $5,000 is nice, but they're expensive. Right, they are expensive. So, and not very novel. Those sorts of incentives have been around for, well, as long as the electric car. So
quite a while, yeah.
So what about at the provincial level, Peter? What's available there?
Provincially, you have an energy affordability program. It's a means-tested financial assistance for individuals struggling to meet their power bill. So energy affordability. There's a small business lighting program. If you have a business that qualifies from an employee count perspective, they give you $2,000 to replace your lighting. There's a retrofit program at a commercial industrial level for lighting and HVAC incentives. But again, these are business applications.
All of them are for the business side,
Yeah, and they're not big. I mean, $2,000 for business lighting is probably going to get you a strip of replacement LEDs. But
right.
If you live in Northern Ontario, there's a whopping $125 credit for the higher cost to offset higher energy costs up that way.
Okay.
And there is one worth looking into called the Ontario Energy and Property Tax Credit, which is somewhere between $25 and a little more than $1,000 for eligible applicants. So that one's worth working through. And that's at the provincial
$25
level.
property tax credit. Wowee. Holy smokes.
Going Green has some sparse feed here.
You know what? I'm astonished by it. I really am astonished by it. I mean, but I guess the theme is there is a lot more there for the business side than there really is for the individual side.
I don't think individuals have as much capacity to move the needle, or at least if they make those choices, there's a narrow range of ways that, benefit can be received for making those types of choices.
Yeah. So I guess the way to approach it is, maybe just speak to an expert, like an energy efficiency expert for your home, and do it because it will improve your own personal cash flow circumstances. And don't wait around for the government to offer you some kind of tax incentive to actually go and do it, Peter. Right.
Well, that all rolls up under tax planning.
Tax planning. Okay.
Really, you shouldn't make an investment based exclusively on tax implications. Like if something needs a tax benefit to prop it up, that's worth examining. But you're exactly right. Tax planning, because it is the largest cash flow item in a family's budget, should be incorporated into all of our thinking. And in this particular case, if there were a few incentives, and there are precious few as it turns out, but tax planning at this level is really important. That's our purpose on Mondays, is to help. And, the only tax planning, green or otherwise, is a great practice to be in the habit of.
Okay. Thank you, Peter. We'll talk next week.
Thank you, Rob.
Yep, bye-bye. Peter Fraser. Peter is with Cardinal Planning and Manulife Securities Incorporated here in Ottawa. Is with us every Monday for Money Monday. That's it for the Rob Snow Show. We're back tomorrow, right after the 9 o'clock news. Sam LaPrade, right after the noon news on City News.
The Rob Snow Show.
Tune in weekdays starting at 9 on Rogers TV and City News.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV.